Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me are my co-hosts, Sheikh Amr and Mort.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Before we get started, help us out on patreon.com/the Mad Mamluks. Thank you for the new Patreon members. Very much appreciated. The effort that is happening over here is not possible without you, and deeply appreciate the new Patreon members. We made a passionate plea, I think, last week, or our last episode. I don't know if it was last week, but deeply appreciate that. If anyone's interested in joining the Patreon membership, you get access to our WhatsApp group, communications to us. You have access to talking to us. Your feedback is heard. And
Sorry.
no, thank you.
No, I just want to make sure we're live.
Well, anyway, we're available to talk to you and accessible, and you kind of see some of the background chatter that happens before the shows kind of get organized. And I think that's one of the cool things about the Mad Mamluks. We don't like make ourselves inaccessible, like, oh, we're superstars or anything like that. Not that we are,
really
but we're really not. But I think that's one of the cool things about being a member. And if you do become a member and you decide to pledge over $100, we'll send you out a T-shirt in your favorite size.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair.
Donate or die.
All right. Our guest today is a personal fitness coach. Our personal trainer. I'm sorry, personal trainer out of California, Bay Area, if I got that right. He is also a former gym owner, dad, a convert to Islam. Please welcome Yusuf Clack. Welcome to the show, Yusuf Clack.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, guys.
Walaikum salam. So with the Yusuf Crack, do we get the cracking?
No, not
Crack.
Not Clack.
I like clack. I think
Hey,
that.
I got both over there.
He purposely misheard him, man.
No, come on. I really heard it. But fine, we get the clacking.
Get the Clack.
Yeah.
Man, it's
He posted a selfie of himself on Facebook, and I replied with the Heisenberg picture. What did he say?
I am the one who clacks.
I'm the one who clacks.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
That's funny.
Man, it's so awesome to be here. I mean, Mad Mamluks is like I was mentioning before. I consider the premier podcast in the Muslim space. I mean, mashallah, I think you guys do a great job in facilitating really interesting conversation without making it feel like it's one particular corner of the ummah, right? I feel like this is the ummah's platform, to engage with ideas and have really interesting conversations. And it really, for those that follow the podcast, it goes throughout all of life. I think my first introduction to it was the Brady Royer episodes, and man, those are just, anyone who hasn't heard that, I'm sure most people listening have already heard those, but if you haven't, just make sure that's the next thing that you listen to.
The Ismail Royer episode you're talking about, right?
Ismail Royer.
Yeah. Those actually got us followed by CNN and all kinds of different news outlets all across the world on Twitter. Wow. It was insane, the amount of attention those got.
It should be made into a movie. I was, I have some buddies that I'm great friends with there that happen to be non-Muslim, but we were on a trip, and on the way back, I was driving back with my friend, and he was like, hey, do you want to put anything on? I was like, you know what? Actually, there's this podcast, this story that I think you'd really enjoy. And he's like, yeah, put it on. And it got us all the way home. It was like a 3-hour drive. And he was wrapped to it the whole time. So really, really engaging, and a lot of morals in there. I mean, too many to recap, but God, so much struggle that Brother Ismail went through. But really, I think one of my favorite parts is the part where he ended up being like a mediator between like rivals inside the jail, and it was like through his efforts that he was able to bring peace between violent factions, and to the point where the guards were even just like, what is going on here? This is not normal. Why are people fighting and like shutting down the prison? We were getting ready for a riot, and that was just shows like the light of Islam. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was insane. He became a good friend of ours. Yours truly helped him get married, find someone like-minded. Yeah, we went to his wedding. Yeah, it was amazing.
So did you know that Russian merchant guy, the merchant of death, that was actually mentioned in your episode?
Yeah, I didn't know that he mentioned in that episode.
I thought he was when he was talking about a cellmate. Didn't one of the episodes wasn't he talking about a cellmate who like taught him a language, and he was a guy he really enjoyed, and he was like an interesting.
Yeah, it may have been. I can't remember.
I have to go back and listen, but I think he mentioned that guy.
What's his name? Victor. Oh my God, I'm slipping. But Victor Boot. Is that it?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, the characters he met in that episode are so fascinating because you meet I think he met the underwear bomber or
no, yeah, that's right, the shoe bomber.
Yeah, who's the one black brother? No, the one who was keep on running his faucet.
Jamila
Lamine, yeah.
Oh yeah, that was a great story.
Yeah, because he's keep on running its faucet, and Jamila means keep on waking up every time he's trying to sleep because the pipes are running through the back of his wall, and he's like cursing the guy who's keep on running the faucet because Ismail does wudu a lot or something. I don't know. He takes long showers. Like I don't remember exactly what the context was, but he would keep on running the faucet, and Jamil Amin couldn't sleep. So he thought Ismail was purposely torturing. You come up because when you're in jail, you think of all kinds of different scenarios, and you have to rationalize why this is happening. And Ismail's the nicest guy. The last person he would want to do is torture Jamil Amin. Imagine that, bro.
Oh man. Yeah, one of the sad things about jail, you hear different people tell their stories, but you have to be in a paranoid state, right? So it activates a part of you, like a survival part of you that it doesn't work in the outside world, but it's almost like required over there. So you almost have to change your mindset. And that it seems like Jamil Al-Amin was full in that, like, oh, this guy's trying to, pick on me or whatever.
Yeah, man. So Yusuf, tell the audience a little bit about you and how, just briefly about your background. I don't know how much you want to divulge about how you became Muslim, but just tell them a little bit about yourself because I think you're
I'm a talker and I enjoy people and probably like I could tell different parts of my story and I don't know what's interesting or not, so I'd love if you would guide the conversation. I mean, anything that you might have seen from anything I've posted or heard about, something that just strikes your interest, fire away. I have some topics I want to throw at you guys to get into some conspiracies and stuff and see where you're at on that. I think it'll be fun. But before we get in that, please, would you like me to start on kind of Islam, how I came to Islam?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's interesting, convert stories. There's always like a like the actual version. If you were like if we were hanging out together, it would be, and you wanted to hear the full thing. Like the internal part is so deep, right? I mean, I remember the first time hearing the adhan in the masjid, just breaking down into like just being overwhelmed, and just feeling like, feeling Allah's just power and greatness and mercy and like everything. It just felt palpable in the air, even though we know, Allah is separate from the creation. But just His, you could just feel that, and it was just it overwhelmed me, right? So, and the path to Islam and finding different things. But I guess it would just I would summarize it.
How many years ago is this?
Sure. So I was a young man. I was basically 20 years old, right, just before I was allowed to drink legally. But I already did plenty in the years leading up to that.
That's the worst. You didn't get to indulge in the haram before you.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, we in my family, my church, we have a family of it kind of goes back. So we start early on, the Clack men. So that's just one of the things that. But yeah, in any case, I was kind of a young man trying to find my way. So you graduate high school. And I remember feeling the sense of like, okay, whatever I want to be as a person for the rest of my life, at that time, Allah put in my heart that this is really the time. These are whatever you because you just see people, once you get into your 20s and especially mid-20s, life just picks up momentum and you're just on a path and that's where most people go. So I just felt like I still had this window of flexibility for whatever reason. And I'm like, you know what, this is the time. Because I feel my parents gave me a lot of great things and a lot of great values. I saw some things where they ran into pain in their life, and I'm like, if I can take what's best from them and figure out how to avoid whatever, things they ran into that caused them hardship and heartache, then that would be great, right? So I was trying to solidify my footing, and that included, like, is there a God? And at that time, I think I'd really settled on, yes, there is definitely a God, but it was more of like, okay, let's kind of custom fit. I'm from California, and that's just kind of the narrative, like, hey, just spiritual, not religious. And so let's go and do some readings and kind of take some from some philosophy, some ancient, wisdoms, maybe some Native American stuff. Try to find a code that really resonates with me, something I can live by, and that I feel like honors God and basically recognizes the fact that I believe in God, and helps me just navigate life. So I kind of went on this path, and around that time was the bombing of the USS Cole, and so this was, what is that, 95? I don't know if we're going to look it up, but somewhere around there.
96, I think.
96, okay. And I remember being like, it's all in the news, right? So Al-Qaeda was starting to get in the news, and for some reason that was just hitting the news cycle big. And I was like, whenever even at that age, I knew that whenever the news cycle gets hit extra hard on something, there's always another angle. So I just was kind of curious, like, let me see what's going on with this. And at the college that I was at, Fremont is a huge it's like the biggest Afghan population outside of Afghanistan. So Fremont, California, in the Bay Area. And that's where I was living. And so I was going to go to Ohlone Community College, and I saw in the syllabus they had a course, Introduction to Islam, and it looked like a Muslim name that was teaching it. So I was like, wow, that seems pretty interesting. So I figured that could be one of the means for me to extract some wisdom. I thought it's going to be these kind of just ancient wisdoms, some of these kind of like funny religious men, just give me a few little things I could kind of take and add to my thing, right? So I went into class, and it's actually filled with a lot of kind of people who have Muslim as or Islam as their culture, or Islam as their religion, like technically, but you could tell that a lot of them didn't know how to pray, or they were Muslim names, but they had some urge to like learn about what their religion was, because I think a lot of them were a lot of Afghanis who fled and came and settled into Fremont were maybe even flat out. I don't want to misspeak, but I believe a lot of them were like communists and not necessarily super strong in Islam, but their kids wanted to kind of find out what it was. So they took that course, had a lot of Pakistanis, a lot of Afghanis, and maybe a couple other I guess whites, for lack of a better word, that I remember. So that seemed to be the demographic of the course. And then so yeah, you get in there and everybody's super friendly, and I'm enjoying it. But the man, he was a Dr. Khalid Siddiqui, a short gentleman, but like not short in character, like super solid in the stature, and very soft and like warm. But man, when he read the ayahs of the Quran, he graduated from Azhar, so he's an Indian, by ethnicity, but he graduated from Azhar, and just, man, when he read the ayat, it was so powerful, right? And he did it so he'd read the Quran and then translate it, and he organized the class in these different topics. And so I remember that over time, like at some point I switched from being like, well, this is not just a few wisdoms that I can live by. Like, I was just surprised at how direct the Quran is in challenging you. It's almost like, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I study kind of sales letters and copy. It was almost like the most powerful sales letter, in the sense that it really just puts you on. It's just direct, really direct right at you. Kind of saying, is it this or that? Is this better than that? Is 3 better than 1? Or, could God do this or that? And so kind of really logical arguments that just put you kind of on a fork on the road. You're forced. You can't just sit back and be like, oh, that's kind of cool. Let me take that. It's just kind of like, oh, this is challenging me. Like, do I believe this or that? Either it's true or it's not. Like, come on. Like, so that kind of really took me off guard. And so I kind of was just, really grip for the rest of the class. And I think I started to become Muslim mentally. I kind of looked at the world through almost an Islamic lens, just in a sense that I definitely believed in God. I believed that Islam was correct. But then now it's a part of like, man, do I really, I think I see this a lot. That's a part where the devil really tries to work on you. Like, hey, this is going to mean this and that. And what about your family? And so all those kind of questions. And I think even at one point I might've started to rebel. I remember one time walking into the class with shorts on, and I felt the disapproval of the instructor. And it's kind of funny. I wasn't even formally a Muslim yet, but I had like short time with like, and that's, especially, coming from his school of thought, that's just like, hey, what are you doing in here? This is a religious class. So he didn't say anything, but he just kind of looked at me. I could feel his disapproval. So little things like that. I think at a point I was starting to rebel a little bit. And then the class ended. That was December, and that was also Ramadan. And so at the end, like Ramadan had started, and I felt like this, like, oh my God, like I'm missing out, So immediately, instead of being on the fence anymore, I was like, you know what, it's Ramadan, I need to fast. So I called up the mosque, and I think I still wasn't sure if I wanted to say Shahada at that point, but I was just like, yeah, it's Ramadan, I got to fast. I'm pretty much a Muslim. I don't know if I want to do the whole formal thing. Like I was worried there was some big ceremony or something I had to go through, but I was just like, let me at least fast with the Muslims. So I called up a number. It turned out to be, I think, the San Francisco, actually, I'm not even sure what number I called, but I just left a voicemail, and I said, something I found in a phone book. At that time, Google wasn't, fully developed, or I don't even know what we had in terms of search engines, right? But you just open up the yellow pages. I found some Muslim, Islamic Center number, left a voicemail, and just said, hey, I think I'm a Muslim. It's Ramadan. I've started fasting. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'd like some help, just maybe trying to pray or something. And boom, I got a call back, and this real nice gentleman just said, hey, you know what? Islam is more of like and it's an immersion, so why don't we just, and he had a lot of wisdom. He's like, hey, if it's cool, why don't we just go spend the weekend? We'll stay at this mosque over there, and that way you're dipped in it, and, around some good people, and you can kind of get the full thing. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So they took me over to the San Francisco, which I guess is the Marcas, mosque over there. And, that kind of led to a whole nother journey. But at the bottom line is that got me in. Before we did that, we met at Juma, right? And that was interesting. So it's like, the whole like Shahada at Juma, I think it's overall a good thing. I know a lot of people talk about like getting too many hugs and being freaked out and stuff, but I think overall for me, it was a good thing. There's just all these brothers. I couldn't believe how excited people were, and just like, you come up in front of the mosque, and the brother was a little bit tricky with me. He's like, come on, you're Muslim, just say the Shahada. He was a little bit like, I was not really ready, but he pulled me up, and he was just like, yeah, hey, come up here and repeat after me. And I was just kind of Shahada, really uncomfortable with the words and everything. Said it, and all of a sudden you just see all these older men with beards from different, backgrounds and stuff going, oh no, brother, just like super excited. They all just came up and, gave me a hug, and, and that was just a great feeling. At that point, I can remember feeling, after everyone kind of gave me a hug and welcomed me, I just thought, man, this is pretty amazing. So I felt really good about my decision at that point.
How'd your family react to it?
So it's funny, at first, my parents were divorced at that time. I remember, I think it was my dad who I was living with my dad. I first told him, and he just kind of looked at me, and, I don't want to use the language he used. He was a great man, but he just, he'd always use foul language and, shit, kiddo, or whatever he'd say. And he'd be like, you're effing crazy. And he just looked at it like, because I was into rap music, right? So that was another thing that was like a shock, being a freshman in high school and just coming home, I remember the Ice Cube CD and the Cypress Hill CD and those things. So that was already a big enough shock. So I think my dad looked at it as like a phase, like, oh man, you're a Muslim, So he just kind of was that a little bit dismissive, but wasn't that concerned about it. I think that then as time went on, I remember at one point my mom was really worried because she thought, I'm going to marry a Muslim, and then all of a sudden I'm just going to be totally lost. And to be fair, like at that time, my expression of Islam was really disintegrated, right? And so I was just, it was just more of a protection mechanism, right? I was wearing all the clothes, I was doing all the full tabligh, and I didn't have a real wise way of like talking to them about Islam. Basically just like, hey, this is the truth, this is what's going on, and you guys better get on it, man, so kind of fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
And so from their perspective, I could see how they thought like, oh, I just got swept away in a cult. And then so they did try to, I remember my mom was really trying to push me out of it at one point. They're like, you're crazy, or look what they do in Saudi, this or that against women, blah, and they just kind of all this stuff. But then over time, especially when she met my wife, who I was going to get married to, and we did it, the traditional way. I'd only met her like twice before we decided to get married. And then we had a dinner with my wife, my at that time future wife's brother and brother-in-law and sister, and we sat down, and my mom just saw how happy I was, and she saw how nice my future wife was, and she just at that time was like she changed. She just like melted, and she's like, oh my god, this is amazing, you know. And then I think as we had kids and things went on, and they just saw how it's such a stabilizing force. You know, things were great. They've been great for the last. I think it was just the first couple of years, maybe some little bit of rockiness, and I take blame for that. And then after that, it was smooth sailing.
Whoa.
Did you anything? What were your siblings' reaction? Do you have any siblings?
Yep. I have a sister. You know, we were at that time. She was living. It's hard to remember if she was living with my dad at that time. I don't think she was. I think she was living with my mom. So, you know, she was kind of doing her own thing at that time. I was doing my own thing. And so it wasn't really discussed, you know, other than like, you know, I don't think she was super like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It just was like, whatever.
So how did you get into this whole fitness business now?
So it goes back to 2008. Remember the first, like, you know, the economic kind of crash or recession. I was working a sales job, and I had my kid in martial arts, Kung Lee. Do you guys follow? Do you know who Kung Lee is at all? That name?
I've heard of that name.
Okay, yeah. Yep, exactly. So he was a big name in Strike Force, and kind of like, you know, he had a famous fight with Shamrock, and so that's kind of, and then he went on to movies. He's just like a really in San Jose, he's a big deal, right? Because we have a huge Vietnamese community, and he just was a total. His kickboxing is just next level. So he had a gym, and what was cool is like, I was all into the, you know, just being raised on Karate Kid. I was all into the idea of like a traditional training, right? So I knew enough to know that like all these martial arts centers, the business model is based on just assigning stripes, and you got to pay for each stripe, right? It's almost like the Catholic Church, where it's like, you know, you got to die, to get married, to anything you do, it just costs a lot of money, right? So with these martial arts businesses, right? It's like everything is, you know, new uniforms, pictures, you know, tournaments. Everything is just cash after cash, which is fine if they're getting real training. But it seems like a big part of the business model is always promoting your kid, right? So you have to get the new stripe. Whereas with Kung Lee, he had a real traditional place. You walk in, and they had a trouble with customer retention because, you know, he was not compromising on the training. These poor kids were doing duck walks and like iron bridges and just all sorts of stuff. You're seeing them little kids, red face, but that's exactly what I wanted for my son. And so I joined that. And I just mentioned that because at that time, in parallel, I'm going to this gym and I'm seeing these vital men. But in my mind, I was like, I think I was early 30s at that point. And I'm sitting here, you know, really overweight. My energy is really low. And I kind of, in my mind, the conversation was, okay, well, I'm a provider now. I got 2 kids. I got one small baby. I got a toddler. And that's just, I'm not a kid anymore. You know, I got to work and I got to do this and that. So kind of the whole idea around being vital, I just let go of that. And it sneaks up on you, right? It's kind of one of those things like the frog in the water or whatever, where it's a slow boil until one day you're like, oh man, I'm really tired when I get home. I don't have any presents for my family. So, but what's interesting about that experience at Kung Lee's gym, it was like a visual contradiction. So I was just seeing these men in their 40s and 50s in the adult classes, like if they're training on the side while my kid is training, or maybe they're before or after. But you're seeing that in the instructors, the clients, and they're ripped and they're basically, you know, super fit. And I'm sitting here just like, you know, out of breath walking to the car. So that was a real, you know, at that point, something in me. I went up to one of the fighters. He actually was a fighter. He went on to fight at Bellator, James Terry. And I was like, hey, you know, can I take some personal training from you? And he's like, yeah. So from there, I signed up. And I think along that time, I was also trying to make some other changes mentally, you know, getting up in the morning before work, reading books. And so it was kind of a number of things that I was just trying to address. And man, the training, it was amazing. I mean, just like the way he kind of went about it. You know, I also worked on my diet. So just like within a few months, I was just shocked at how different, you know, a person could feel. And it was just to the point where, I mean, I'm sure I was annoying to everyone around me, but it was just so exciting. And I got in my head that, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I want to give this to other guys in my situation. So I just had the crazy idea to, you know, write a sales letter and hired an instructor, and we started a boot camp. The first one was called Ramadan Boot Camp. And we basically, I just called my network and I was like, you got to do this, and made them pay a bunch of money and buy kettlebells and stuff like that. And we just went and we just thought we were crazy, like military, like hardcore, doing all these swings and everything. And so, yeah, it started off like that. And from there, it just was a process. Little by little, we rented spaces, martial arts spaces. And then one of the clients was really happy with what we were doing, and he helped us put together some investors, and we ended up getting a gym. And that's how we got into our location in San Jose.
Nice. So now the whole process of you getting the gym in San Jose, and then I understand you lost the gym during the lockdowns. Tell us about what happened during the lockdowns.
Yeah, so that was frustrating, right? Because first of all, I felt a real duty to make sure, of course the government gives that information, but I'm always the type of guy where I want to just read up as best I can. I'm, being in the industry, I was connected to some people that really know how to review evidence. I had practiced myself trying to go through research reviews and try to get a handle on this thing. I know we were all freaked out, I won't mention it, so the censor, but when the thing first hit, we were all freaked out about it. And basically, we obviously shut everything down. There was a whole thing like, stay the F home. You had people putting on their profile like, stay the F home, and they're in 14 days. And so it was like kind of really, okay, let's stay home. You're seeing pictures on the news of China, people just getting stuffed in, you're hearing about mass cremation sites, and, it was real freaky, right? So we're all just staying at home. But, I'm reading more and more, and I'm starting to realize early on that the touch contact was not really a big deal. It was an inhalation type thing, from the particles in the air. And even with the touch, that's an easy thing to fix. We don't have to like touch each other, in the gym. I guess we could stop high fives or whatever. But I was like, okay, we have an open air gym. What was really unique about our facility is that we were in a warehouse, trying to get centered here. But we were in a warehouse this way. Yeah. It had open air to the top, and we had nice big ceiling fans. We were not crowded, right? So we had like plenty of space to work out and so forth. So we basically, I figured out early on we were going to be safe, right? As long as we just capped the attendance and maybe kept distance and stuff like that, and the fans are on, and we had both garage doors open, right? We had a huge, nice airflow. There was a creek behind us. So there's always a breeze. It's very rare that you go in there, even on a hot day, and there was like zero breeze. So I was trying to get people to come back, and I just realized more and more that, not only was the propaganda, I'll call it propaganda. Not only was the propaganda, the fear just coming super strong. Like people are getting legit terrified. I could see the PTSD on their face. I had clients say, look, I don't mind coming myself, but the reason I killed my parents, right? That was the whole kind of rhetoric at that time. And I just saw like how people were acting, and no one's really looking at sources other than what's coming from the government. So at that time I had to make a decision like, okay, in some ways I'm partnering with the government here. So I need to, why is it so hard to be center? Like that.
Oh, you're
like
fine.
That. Okay. So at that time I just had to place a bet. Like, okay, well, how long is this going to be? I remember one time, I think the thing that tipped me over the fence was there was a time where we got our hopes up. They're like, oh, you can reopen. I don't know how it was over where you're at, but in California, there was like a 2-day thing where they said, okay, guys, the businesses can reopen. You have to print out all these sheets, which we didn't do, but you got to basically post all your policies. You have to have sanitizer everywhere. You have to wash after everything. Nobody comes near each other in 6 feet, blah, blah, blah. So we were like, okay, we can make that work. So we were getting excited. We reopened. And then it was like 2 days after that, they're like, oh, just kidding, shut everything back down. And, in fact, I was training people personal one-on-one through that time, but I got reported. Somebody reported me, and I had like a detective actually call me and, get threatened with fines. And I'm just like, man, this is, even when it opens back up, I knew there's going to be all these, I saw how different the personal training business was going to be. And I was like, what I love about personal training is the personal part of it,
Yeah.
High five, slapping a guy in the back, making jokes, like just being up in our space, and really all that stuff. It's broken if we're like in masks and just kind of afraid, we'll do like air elbow bumps and just weird stuff like that. So I was like, I'm out of here. I'm just tired of this. So that's where I kind of just decided it's going to be tough to, and it wasn't, I want to take responsibility too, right? I got to a place in the business where I think I was kind of coasting, and that's my bad. I just was happy with everything. I mean, I was happy with my family life, happy with the gym, and we were not like crushing it financially. We were just, it was like a lifestyle business. So I didn't have the reserves, or I didn't have necessarily like the overflowing customers to be like, okay, let's hang on. It was really one of those things where I had to place a bet, like, okay, I can't just keep surviving like this. I mean, even if I take some government assistance or people help me out, I had to place a bet on the future, and I just realized it's going to be a while to get back cranking again. So that's where I decided to dip out.
Yeah, I just remember so many gyms over here during the lockdown just being completely shut down, and it was just puzzling to me how a lot of these gyms were shut down unless you were affiliated with the big company. Over here, we have Lifetime and a couple other gyms that were able to withstand that kind of financial blow. But the majority of places were to this day are shut down. But
restaurant. I mean, so many small businesses, right? And I mean, that's a different topic. But I'm real passionate with the relationship between small business and just freedom in general, and religious freedom. Any type of, the First Amendment is very much tied to finances, right? So if you rig the playing field, you don't have to change the First Amendment. You could just rig the playing field to make it impossible to do small business, and all of a sudden you're controlled, right? If you have to work for one of the major corporations that's partnered with government, you're basically you're really restricted. So it was really heartbreaking. That brought a whole different path in life, but that was heartbreaking at first to see how willingly we were. And I know it's serious. I know people lost a lot of lost family members and everything, but I just felt we were very unwise in the way we're just willing to sacrifice so many restaurants and small businesses.
Yeah. Well, that led you to a different type of approach with your event-centric approach, where one of our co-hosts, Shaq, he has a similar approach as well. And can you talk about how you organize your workout clientele and your philosophy behind that?
Yeah, so basically one of the guys that I used to follow a lot, and I still do, this guy named Adam T. Glass. In fact, on my YouTube channel, I only have one video right now. It's just a podcast about an hour and a half long. It's a conversation with Adam T. Glass. He's a world record grip. He's a world record grip champion in a number of different events. And he's always just been a free thinker and a really, when you hear him, he's a very well-spoken and just very critical the way he thinks through things. But he's always a guy who would test things on himself and not just take things verbatim. He was really high up in the RKC, which was the original, kind of Pavel kettlebell organization, which really, he was high up in there until he had some differences, and that's an interesting story. But in any case, the reason I mentioned him is he's somebody that I just always paid attention to. And so he called me up and he's like, hey, I got this system I want you to try, and I think it'd be great for your clients. And at first I was skeptical. He's like, before we talk about it, I want you to read this book. And so that way you have, the background on it. And then basically it just kind of made the case for how you could do a low frequency approach, and basically still make it successful. And that started helping me at that time. And then I started practicing it. And then I started connecting all these dots, because back at the gym, there's a real challenge in Silicon Valley. And I think a lot of professionals and people with families, which is there's not enough just low level activity. I call it sub exercise. So it's like below the level that you would call it exercise, but it's just not enough activity. So one of the blessings of Islam is we pray 5 times a day at least, in our joints and our ankles and low backs and hamstrings, especially if you do the ruku right, your hamstrings get a little bit of a stretch. There's so much the blessing built into that. But in the general population, and I'm not saying that's enough, but at least that's a start. You'll see a lot of people that if they live the sedentary life for 20 years, their ankles get super tight, and that starts to create a lot of other problems, right? Tight ankles mean knee pain, and the more you're in pain, the less you're going to move. So in any case, I started to come to the conclusion. I would tell people, I'm like, look, you're signing up to our program. We're trying to work you hard because we want you to get your money's worth, and we want you to see results. But you're telling me in the background, you're getting like no activity, right? So sometimes people track their steps, and it's very, very little, especially now people work from home. So I came to the conclusion it's just not a great idea, especially for adults, to add really intense exercise on top of just like no activity. right? So I think the digital age, the last 20 years especially, there was that Harvard article that came out, like the sitting is the new smoking. And since that time, that article is like 15 years old, I think, or 10 years at least. We've gone way even more, that was way before the work from home trend. So people have developed such sedentary habits. And I just thought, okay, that needs to be addressed, right? And especially with weight loss, like weight loss is about appetite. So how are we going to manage appetite if we just, set up 3-4 hardcore sessions a week and you're not doing anything else? There's no time in your life to really work on your relationship with food and so forth. So I have a whole new approach, which is, personal training. And then, I call it event centered because it's just, you got to make 20 appointments in a year with me. And then, I might assign you a few more auxiliary workouts, or if people have certain things they like to do, there's no real harm as long as it just stays really low stress. Because the idea is like during these events, we take you all the way to the max. We shorten the range of motion so it's safe. I might wrap up your wrists, certain movements, depending on what we decided we're going to use. We might put on a belt on you. We'll make sure your joints are safe. We'll shorten the range of motion, but then it's going to be heavier than you've ever done, and we're going to just go to absolute failure. And it's all logged, right? And the time and everything. So the net of that is the person is completely spent. There's no rest. There's no talking. One of the challenges with the personal training relationship is there's a lot of talking between sets, socializing, and that can have a dynamic on the ultimate transformation of the person. This is just, there's no time for that. We're just stripping weights, loading weights onto the next one. Everything is timed, and we're trying to beat our overall power index from the workout before. So that allows me to take care of the resistance training part, or the structure, the strength. So if people are trying to grow their glutes or their shoulders or whatever it may be, we can take care of that with this really, I call it expanded failure approach, just going really, really deep, taking a lot out of the person. And then the flip side of that is that the person can, take time off of, not worry about resistance training. If they want to do some curls at home or some push-ups in between, whatever they like, as long as it's just not super taxing, so it doesn't interrupt that recovery process. And then they can focus on the low level, getting and using that extra time that they save from not going to the gym, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week. They can now start going for a walk, which I'm a big fan of for multiple reasons, but trying to get tons of low level activity that you don't even consider exercise. You could almost be prayer, because during a walk, you can really be in your thoughts. You can connect to Allah. You can really change your life. You can listen to Madman Luke's, right? You can just basically, engage in nice, different conversation, develop yourself. So it doesn't even feel like time spent. It's really time. It's time invested in prayer and trying to work on many things. But the net of that is it helps your appetite. And for people with weight loss goals, that's the whole process. Trying to get that appetite from betraying you and just going wild. And calming down, getting more space in your life, walking, being thoughtful about your relationship with food. That's really where the weight loss is going to come. And then the event-centered approach just, makes it easier for people to get their workouts in.
So let me ask you. So you said this. You said 20 sessions in the year. So that means about 2 a month. Do you meet them twice a month?
Yeah, it starts off more frequent because the stronger you are, the more recovery you need, right? So in the beginning, I like to see them every week for the first 3 sessions, and the logbook will tell us how they're doing. But as they get stronger, and the overall index is going up, you can get away with a lot more rest. In fact, it ends up being better.
No, that's interesting because I joined an old man's cross training thing. Like, it's for people that
What's it called?
Just for older people. I mean, the guy who co-hosts with us is Shaq, I mean, he's not an old guy, but they're around my age, in their late 30s or their 40s. And one thing I noticed when I first started, I used to lift a lot when I was younger. I lift a lot of just isolated weights, chest, thighs, backs, all that stuff, right? But as I got older, especially like you said, being sedentary and sitting down all the time, the first day I got there, I started it maybe a couple months ago. And the first thing I realized the first day I threw up in 30 minutes. It was intense, right? We did so what they do is they do a circuit. So you'll do a bunch of different things, like, in the beginning on the green side, you'll do sleds, tire flips, hammer. They change it all up, right? Like plank, all the stuff, Russian twist. And then they do 30 minutes on the weight side. So it could be, they'll mix up, they'll pair up the exercises. They have it all ready for you. Right. The first day, 30 minutes into it, I threw up. I'm like, oh.
Right.
But the thing that I took away from it was, that I realized how disengaged my core was. Like doing a simple thing like Turkish get-ups was like something that you feel like, oh my God. Like I realized how weak, because I guess I realized when I was sitting in my chair, I work from home.
What's a Turkish get-up?
So basically you lie on your back and then you kind of prone up and then you have a kettlebell. So like this, you hold it on the lying on the back and you prone up.
Okay, so with let's just say you're with your right hand, you're lying on your back.
So look, let's say you're lying on your back, right? Then you prone up on your elbow, then you fully prone up on your arm, so you're still holding up like this.
Okay.
Then you have to get up on, you have to switch the position, so you get up like kind of like your.
That's pretty intense, man.
But then but first you do it without kettle weights. So you imagine just doing it like getting up and then and then you kind of stand up on one leg. But eventually you end up using kettlebells. The thing is that just doing it without the weights was like engaging, like, oh my God, like what is that, right? Yeah. And I realized, and I think it's because when you sit down so much, I work from home, I'm in IT, I work on the computer all day long, and I'm coming here, I'm sitting in the chair, and I like to lean back. Like I usually sit when I'm working, I sit like this, right? Lean back. Your core is not engaged, right? It's completely unengaged. And I realized that I think a lot of guys in my age group, you might have big arms, you might have big legs or whatever, or triceps, I guess those muscles don't disintegrate, but your core is weak. Like you're walking around, and I think that's where you get injured, right? A lot of times. So I noticed that for me, that was the biggest difference that I saw. And so I only do it twice a week, because the guy that I use, the philosophy is, if it's painful, stop. I'd rather have you go 60, 70% than go, like full speed and then not come back later on in the week when you have an injury or something, right? The idea is longevity and like kind of, building the habits, right? They have Zoom sessions about food and recovery and sleep and everything else. But the idea is that to keep building you steadily. And I noticed that when I was younger, it was just pump hard or go home, right? Like just pump. I don't care. I'm gonna work. I'm gonna go to failure. I'm gonna rip my biceps out. And now it's kind of like it's a whole different approach. But I noticed that I feel the core being engaged in like just flexibility. If that makes sense.
No, 100%. And that's a conventional approach. That's the kind of like I was really that kind of health first type trainer where we sold aesthetics, but I really wanted to make sure. And I'm still like that. I never want it's do no harm is the first thing. You never want to be like, you're taking some guy or gal and basically blow their shoulder out or knee out, and you're like, well, we were just trying to be legendary, and they're like, they have to like stay off their job for 3 months or whatever. Yeah, they're like, thanks a lot, I got fired, or so that's going to be, that doesn't make sense. I mean, even bodybuilding, it's like you just get a plastic trophy at the end. I mean, it's still badass. It's like if you can win that and you can do that. So you got to be clear on what is really important to you, so you can put that risk reward in your favor. But I think it's a tougher sell psychologically, right? Because you're like what you just said, everything you said was perfect. You articulated the viewpoint of somebody who's really kind of bought in. And I think a lot of my clients would get that. But the rubber would meet the road just as the time goes on, the months go on, and you're only going two times a week. So that sounds like a much better balance. But my thing is I was trying to get people to come 3 or 4 times a week. And I would say, look, we're not going to achieve our goals in one workout. The main thing is being able to come back tomorrow, so I'd rather you do that 60-70% so you can come back tomorrow. But in practice, man, a lot of people drop off on that. They would intellectually be like, yeah, I get it, that makes sense. But then you're talking about downtown San Jose, the commute. You're talking about on top of that, they've got to get cardio in, right? Because basically if you're working a job with a lot of responsibility in Silicon Valley, you have calls overseas, you're staying up late and whatever it might be, in your family and so many things. It's not that they couldn't make the time, but they're like, realistically, I do have other priorities in my life. And so a lot of them would just, with the best of intention, it wasn't that they were lazy, but they would just fall off and be like, it's not working for me right now. I'm like, yeah, okay, nope.
So are you doing this like this? You did intense sessions, and then are you focusing more on the diet side of it with them, working with them on the diet? Because I know there's different philosophies, but a lot of people say obviously like 70% of your weight loss is going to be diet, right? And by the way, before you answer that, I should preface what I said, how I got into the training. Yeah. I started honestly just going to the gym, and I was just doing literally incline walking for an hour. I was doing that for like 2-3
that's perfect.
Weeks. Yeah, I was doing that for 3-4, and then I wanted to kind of go to the next level. So I already had this habit of going to the gym, right? Like just go, and it was easy for me because I was doing like the incline walking, and I felt like I wasn't putting too much stress because I used to run on the treadmill before, and that was just way too intense for me now, right?
Why didn't you walk outside? I'm curious. Was it too cold?
So I used to, but then winter came in Chicago. Winters get real cold, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna go inside and I can take a quick shower and jump in, hit the sauna, right? I'm good. And then I started doing, now what I do in the off days, I do Stairmaster for 30 minutes a day. I put on like level 8, 9, and 30 minutes outside the days that I'm not training. And so I can, but I think you're right. I think if I was just to go right into like cross training, I'd be like, man, I don't want to do that. It's too much, too intense. I kind of already had this mindset that I'm going to be going every day to the gym. So that kind of made it easier. I think once I began to see the health and the fitness, I wanted to go to the next level anyways. It wasn't, I don't think I would have started off at doing cross training. I would have been like, screw this. I got to work tomorrow. I'm not going to be in pain. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And that base level movement is just so important. Like the thing is, we haven't been able to quantify because it's pretty recent in our society where we've basically taken out like everything can be delivered now, right? You don't even have to go to the grocery store. So literally everything has been taken out of our lives, especially here in Silicon Valley. So the cost of that, we're not going to really know for a while. So what I look at it is, what's the sense of having a super hardcore program where I'm stretching and I'm working on mobility? It's like, you don't even, maybe your hips and your feet and your low back and your core would actually have basic levels of strength if you got your 10,000 steps in. So let's put that in as a baseline before we start, because everybody loves, they read a certain article, and trainers do this too. We get these fancy certifications. We read this super cool explanation of, anatomy trains, and this balances with that, and your one foot is shorter than the other, and your hip, and you look at you, and you got all these gee-whiz explanations. It's like, okay, before we get into that, why don't we just get a base level of activity? Walk 10,000 steps for a month. I mean, and that's not, I do that in parallel. I'm not saying someone has to do that before they start with me. But basically what I do is I address the if people want results, so I address that, and I do it in a way where they don't have to have core strength. They don't have to have really any starting point. On their first day, like before, what I used to do is I see someone, like especially, from some of the Desi population, let's say you get a brother, he's 40, right? And he's never done anything physical. He never played football or wrestled or like maybe never even played soccer. He's just been in Silicon Valley in math class, and now he's like, okay, like I'd like to get fit. That type of person, I would be real careful because I wouldn't want them to, get a herniated disc, or I wouldn't want them to blow a shoulder. I'd want to see what they could take. So it would have to be a very gradual approach. And half the time I would lose that person in the first couple months because I'm going so darn gradual, and they're like looking at me intellectually like, I get it, I can just do the bar. And as a trainer, I'm like, I want to see everything perfect. I want to see everything. I don't want to get you hurt. Then they're like, yeah, I get it, but you know what? I came here to work out. So my new approach is like, on your first day, I don't care. I mean, okay, maybe not your very, very first day, because right now there's a heart attack thing going around, and again, we can't talk about that. But I don't, I want to just see what the the very first day, I might just go 75%, and then by the next session, because we're shortening the range of motion, because I'm protecting their joints, because I'm very selective in the movements that I choose, they're like whether it's leg press, whether it's in a modified floor press. Different things that they don't need to master a deadlift. They don't need to master a certain form. I can push them to the absolute brink until they're like they're just like like, just
So are you doing like machine workouts, like leg press in the machine? So it's like less, because I know the second day I went in, I was familiar, but some guys weren't, like just doing deadlifts or squats, right? And I think for a new guy, that's intimidating, like putting on weights, because you would think, oh, you got to put on 45 plate, and a guy comes in the first day doing squats, he's having trouble with the bar, right? How do you even get the position on, right? So are you doing like machine then, for the most part, to keep them from like hurting themselves?
So so I like the barbell for floor press because the barbell is a very efficient tool, but the problem with squats, especially for our age, and I'm older than you, but like a lot of the clients I train are older too, your hips. So if you do a nice full range squat, it feels great. And I don't recommend people do it or learn it. That's fine. But I like to use a squat as a mobility tool. So if people have more time and they want to go to the gym outside of their trainings with me, no problem. But they can just like keep it real light. Just don't get crazy with it. But when you start to lift, even at like 50 or 60% of your total, I at least, and I know a lot of people, we get really tight hips unless I train squats frequently, which is a pain. I don't want to go to the gym and train squats 3 times a week just to avoid soreness. But if I train full depth barbell squats, my hips are sore for a couple days, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm selecting different moves. I'll use the barbell floor press. I love the leg press, and it's just partials. And with that, they're secure. I can push them like unbelievably hard because we're shortening the range of motion. It's a new level of failure. Once you feel safe, you can reach a new level of expanded failure, and it's shocking. The guys, when they're done, they're looking, they're like, oh my god, they can't believe they went through it because they stereotype themselves as someone who would just, oh, I'm not a workout guy. I want to just kind of ease into it. I'm like, yeah, so I don't bait and switch them, but once they're comfortable and I see they're doing it, boom, we go into the full thing. So yeah, it's a mix of machines. So one machine I really like for the arms is the plate curl machine, and I'll just do the top of the range, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of the full range of motion where at the bottom, if somebody were to fail on a curl, you could see that online. You could see people blow their bicep tendon. So what we do is we do the top of the range. It looks like we don't know how to work out. We're convulsing. It looks ridiculous, but it is so, until you try it and see the numbers.
You're just going like this and then stop. You're not going all the way down, pretty much, right?
We're just looking like dorks, just pumping the very top, like in convulsion, right? And just, yeah. To the point I got kicked out of a gym. I got kicked out of a gym one time because it was a personal gym and the guy didn't want me to it kind of gives off a vibe like you just don't, like it's your first day at the gym. Okay. And I learned from that time. I learned from that time. I need to give background to the other gyms I work with. Like, look, I promise you, I know what I'm doing. Here's my credentials or my history. It's just an unorthodox method. And I give them background. I tell them I didn't make it up, but but it just looks like we have no idea what we're doing. And then that's just.
I have a quick question. So are you doing? So when you say you're pushing them, are you doing do you drop down the weight and then just do higher reps in the first push, or are you just doing just maxing out from the get-go?
So this will sound unbelievable, but it's only 2 sets per exercise, and it's usually just 5 exercises. And in fact, my workouts personally, I've gotten so strong on certain movements like the leg. I hate to call it a leg press because it's really just the end of the motion, right? I mean, it takes me more time. I take every weight in the gym and put it on there. And again, we've all seen that guy in the gym, made fun of him, was just doing a partial rep, right? But we just load that thing just crazy amount, and it takes so damn long. Yeah. But then we just go little pulses to absolute failure. It might be 40, it might be 60, it might be 70 pulses until you're just every last fiber is recruited.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the isometric exercise, but with a little bit of movement, right? Like when you something still, it fires up the fibers and there's no moving. So I think the philosophy you're referring to is that you just move like 3 or 4 inches. It's kind of like isometric exercise to strengthen the muscle, not necessarily grow it, right?
No, you can grow with isometrics. That's a very good. It's just isometrics are a little bit. You have to be skilled and kind of know what you're doing to know that you're really working yourself. So the same principles. And there's some debate. I mean, that's why range of motion is so thought of highly, is that a lot of studies talk about something called the length-tension relationship, but I don't think anything's been studied to where you push someone to the level, that I'm pushing someone. So the argument on my side is like, okay, yeah, there's obviously more range of motion on equal weight or even slightly, lighter weight or higher weight. The range of motion is going to win out. But when we're talking about way more weight, right? 900 pounds on the leg press versus like you were just going to do maybe, a couple 100 pounds or 250 doing full range of motion. But yeah, at the end of the set, it's almost an isometric, right? So we're pulsing them like crazy. And then to the point where, I don't do this one my first few sessions, but once I feel comfortable and that person's strong, I'll make them just fight. Like before we rack that thing, it's just like the end is basically an isometric, right? So just every last fiber is possible. And then when they're done, and they feels totally released. Like before we leave people with something in the tank, and I'd almost have to make them feel better about themselves. Like, it's okay, we're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to be back in a couple. They're like, yeah, but I came to this hardcore gym. I thought you were going to kill me, And I'd have to work with them. I'd be like, okay, we'll go on the treadmill or do these dumb ab exercises. I'd negotiate with them. I'd have them do stuff like do some mountain climbers, even though it's like, I mean, it benefits, but you'd want to give them that rush of feeling hardcore, even though the whole, so that was an interesting balance. Now I can actually really do that and give them, I call it an adventure.
It reminds me of the slow tempo training, it's the 2 sets, 5 exercises, 2 to 3 times a week. You literally do 10 seconds up, 10 seconds down in your contractions.
Yeah, right? Is that that's a Body by Science guy, right?
Body by Science, yes, sir. And I tried that one for a little while, and I actually liked that a lot because I never felt so when you go to the gym, like you said, you want to work really hard. And the problem is that if you're doing 2 sets of each exercise, you have 5 exercises, you're done only half an hour or less. but it can be pretty taxing once you get used to it because let's say your max bench is 200 pounds, right? And you're taking 100 pounds or 125 pounds, right? And your concentric contraction, you're going up 10 seconds, coming down to central contraction 10 seconds, but you're also holding it at the top also a little bit, right? So imagine doing like 12 reps like that. And sometimes people, they don't realize how good it is for them. From the very limited amount that I read, it's supposed to be very good for you, especially when you get older. You're strengthening your muscles, you're growing your muscles, and you're lessening injury probability of just going really slow with less weight. And it works the muscle differently. So, but if you can I'm still trying to understand fully. So if a 40-year-old comes in, he's not used to working out. He comes into your gym. What is a protocol, a specific protocol that you're putting him on? Like I understand the slow, the lower range of motion and everything that you mentioned, but what exactly are you putting on? What is he doing in the gym, in and out?
So part of this is my secret sauce, but I'll give you an idea. Like basically, we have two different gyms I work out of. So a lot of it too is a function of what equipment we have, right? Also, I have to look at his or her body. So for example, I got a gentleman right now. He's like, I think he's about 6'2", and a little bit of a belly, but he's just really long, and he's not able to hold himself. One of the exercises I love is the hanging leg raise, and I'll use that as the end, right? So basically, that's probably that's the one exercise we use where there's not a lot of weight, but I take them to just absolute failure, and we do like partial reps. I just get them to be totally done with their core at the end. So for him, I had to make an adjustment. But I want to get something for the legs, right? A lot of times use the lying hamstring, and sometimes I'll alternate, right? So it's 20 workouts in a year, and the leg press is so darn heavy that I won't always do that, especially as they get stronger. I won't do that each time. And sometimes people want to pay more and go weekly with me, right? In that case, I'll alter it. But in general, if you want to do the regular program, 20 sessions, I call them 20A workouts because those are going to be like all the big movements: floor press, leg press. We'll do probably a hammer strength row. We'll do, let's see, we might do a hip thrust in there or a lying hamstring, and then we'll do a standing cable curl. And again, that just looks ridiculous. People wouldn't believe it until they see it, but it's just it's fun. The weights go up. You feel so dead after you do it. You're just like convulsing back and forth. And so yeah, usually those 5 minutes. But I have a whole, like, fortunately with my background, I can just make a lot of adjustments on the fly depending on the person. There's a lot of options.
Did you ever try the shake weight?
Oh, the thing go like this. Sounds like you're doing something weird with your hands.
Seems like
yeah.
Part of your methodology,
No, bro, come on, man. That is, yeah. My limits, man.
I think that guy.
At least we're using heavyweight. Shake weight is light. We're at least using. I mean, when I'm talking about curls, it's the stack is at like 120. While they're trying to like rep out, tons of weight.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest though. Like, I mean, I remember when I got in, they were like, okay, on the green side, they were like, okay, you're gonna do. He's like, part of the exercises was like, you're gonna do lunges without weights, but double dip each time you go 1 step, right? I'm like, oh, it's not gonna make that hard, but I can tell you, man, by the end of the walk, like I felt more failure in my leg than I did with doing like squats or like a press, and it's without weights, and people don't realize that sometimes basic movement, if you do them the right way. And enough times can get you a total body like workout, and like something like that engaged my core, my legs. It was just everything was engaged, and I felt dead after it. To be honest, it was a closing exercise, but I felt so dead at the end. And you would think something so simple, and the reason why I like that was because at least I think as I'm getting older, I don't want to be that guy that's not flexible enough to bend down and tie his shoes or sit on the floor, because sitting on the floor is a big part of our culture, right? So I don't want to be the guy who has to sit in the chair in the mosque. I'm not going to be that guy who's sitting on the chair at Jummah. Okay, it's not going to be me. I'm going to be sitting down the floor with everybody else, right? And so
100%.
Yeah. So I'm like, I really worry about those kind of, because I realize, what's the point of being really bulky and big if you can't like move? If you don't have functional strength, like you can't lift the box and you're moving, what's the point? If all you can do is waddle around, I don't get it.
Well, you gave a lot of a lot of language in there that would need to be clarified. Functional is a funny one, right? Because strength is very functional. They've done studies where they had people just do leg press, and they still were able to improve their slam dunk height or whatever, right? So if you get stronger, you're going to jump higher. Now there's obviously you can optimize that if you want to optimize your jump, or you want to optimize your strength off the line, or what have you. The question is on flexibility. My old approach was put it all in one, like get them to the gym 3, 4, 5 days a week and make them do those full lunges, own every part of the range, right? There's a million ways to make somebody really tired and make them work. The question is priorities, because muscle, it's not like we have the option of getting really big, right, without drugs. I mean, unless you eat a lot and, but if you're simultaneously watching calories, doing your walking, cutting, you're trying to get as much muscle as possible, because it's still not going to be a lot, if you're natural.
Right.
It's not going to be like, you'll be lifting a lot of weight, but you're not getting big. You're just building muscle. So, and that muscle tone, right? If you go a normal approach, did I lose everybody? Are you guys still there?
No,
we're here.
You're good.
Okay, cool. If you do a normal, what was I going to say?
The normal approach, you're not going to get too big.
If you do a conventional approach, because just what you said, right? I believe all that. But if you do a conventional approach, most adults won't add much muscle tissue, And muscle tissue is a really valuable asset. So my whole approach right now is, with your time with me, and it's precious, right? If your time with me, let's do the stuff that might be a little dangerous on your own, and really prioritize that. But that's in no way saying don't do the other stuff, like do some lunges. You might just not take it to complete failure, because I don't want your nervous system, like I want you to be able to recover, but a person should still, like the walk-in, first of all, should make their hips flexible. You could do body weight squats at home. You should still be able to do the lunges, right? So as much as a person wants to make themselves mobile and everything, but I just kind of detach from, instead of trying to get everything all in on one workout, it's like, let me do the mobility stuff. And I'll tell each person where their tightness is, right? So I've got most of us have upper back issues, right? So all my clients, I'll say, hey, I want you to do your stick passes at home, and I want you to do some upper back, stretching. I want you to sit at the bottom of a squat, like holding on to something. But if they do that I'd rather them do that 5 minutes a day and in their own convenience in their home and integrate it into their life, versus like try to bake that into our resistance training and just get it all for one. So it's like I'm pursuing a little bit of muscle, a little bit of strength, a little bit of functional, a little bit of this and that. And, there's no right or wrong, obviously, like both. I love the other way as well. I found that for the clientele that I'm after, one of the main barriers was just putting in the time. If somebody can make it work with a high frequency approach and they're near a gym and they enjoy doing all those moves, that can be just as effective or more. But what I'm loving now is that a person can they don't have to become a gym person. Before you had to like sell yourself on this idea that, I'm now a gym rat or whatever. I'm a gym person. Now it's like, hey, you can still be who you are. Just show up to my thing. Let me punish you to like, no way, we're going to go to expanded failure. In fact, one guy today, he had to take a nap, in his car right after the session, and, just 15 minutes, just get himself like back to life. But just show up to my 20 appointments, WhatsApp me every day your metrics, and we'll do some stretching. We'll do, depending on what your needs are or your goals, I'll have you do a few things, right? Some people have really weak core. I'll have them work on some core stuff at home. But yeah, so that way it just decouples them from having to hit the gym all the time or become a gym person. And I say that being a kind of a gym bro myself. So I got all the love for the guys, hitting the gym all the time. But the person that I feel like there's 5% of the population that's kind of all bought in, and there's a huge swath of the population that really could use more muscle, really could get healthier and fitter, but becoming a gym person is just a non-starter for them.
Yeah, so I see you kind of, like, the way I'm seeing it is more like a hybrid model, where you're like, listen, you come in a few times, a month, but the rest of the time you got to do on your own and kind of without the supervision. But they kind of have to be willing to do the work. I mean, I think there has to be some motivation, self-motivation at some point, right? To be like, hey, I'm going to go, once or twice a month to this guy, but on the sound time, I got to be able to do other stuff to do the, to do the smaller exercises that I want.
Yeah, if I sell you on my coaching, the person is going to be bought into a degree, but it's not as much motivation as you think, because it's like, okay, you're already having these workouts, which I call them adventures. They're like these crazy experiences. And, you got your other goals, and it's really not much. And even if they miss a week or two, that, we're going to have the check-in, so I got the accountability. Mm-hmm. So over time, even if you're not motivated, I'm like, hey, did you get those core things in? Or did you, oh, man, I forgot it. It's eventually, we're working with each other for 12 months. So eventually they, with the check-in, they're just like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Right. And it doesn't even really take much motivation. I mean, if they wanted to do a whole extra lunge workout or some other stuff, they could. But I think that, they could just do a little stretch. It just really depends where a person's at. A lot of people, their flexibility is not too bad. They might have a little bit of core weakness, but it's surprising. Like when somebody's untrained and you put them through those leg raises, it's amazing like how different after like say 3-4 of these crazy failure workouts, within a couple months, their core is in a totally different strength. That doesn't mean it's ripped up, right? That's a body fat issue. Right. But as far as what they can take in amount of time and what their core can do, right. I think the encouraging thing is, man, a little bit of training can just go, it can give people so much more than what they realize.
So how did you develop this? Did you, it's kind of like through trial and error, just lots of reading, and like how did you develop this specific method?
Yeah, if anyone interested, check out the podcast on my channel for like the full story. But Adam, I just got it handed me from Adam. And again, there's very few people I would kind of almost blindly trust, right? But it's like, he's not a Muslim, but he's like my sheikh in fitness. Like if he says something, he's got so much credibility with me. And when you hear him talk, you'll see why. And when you see how strong he is, he's a guy that just has been in fitness, for so long. And he's done it all. He's done like the strong stuff. He's done the calisthenics. He could do pinch grip pull-ups, which is crazy to see. You got like these these like things and you're basically, doing that. So he's done a lot with his body, and he's kind of been on all spectrums of the fitness side, whether it's picking up heavy things or doing really cool calisthenic stuff. And he's just been around a lot of the top figures, right? So whether it's any of the top fitness, Dan John or Pavel or, Brett Contreras, he's kind of in those circles and been around all those guys. So like when he said, hey, you got to do this, if it was anyone else, I'd be like, that's not going to work, that partial stuff. Everyone knows full range of motion is the only way to go. Come on, but because he said it, this guy's not somebody who just like exaggerates, right? And he does it himself. He's like, you won't believe it. It's something I've been doing myself for years. I run a cycle of it. He likes to do grip work, so he's not doing this type of training. But he'll do it like every few years. He'll do a cycle of this for like 6 months or a year. And he's also so darn strong that this type of training, for him to do it, it takes so much out of him. Like, and he has a physical job. So basically, he has to totally rearrange the way he does things. Because like, just to give you an example, when I finish my workout, I think it's around, I should get my logbooks. I don't want to misquote, but it's maybe a couple 100,000 pounds moved by the end of it, or 150,000, somewhere in there, depending on which movements I do. And then for him, he's getting over 1 million pounds in a workout being run through his body, right? So he'll take a crazy amount of overhead, weight. So that sort of weight and that sort of poundage moved throughout your frame on a workout, it just takes so much out of you. So he just saves it for, every few years he does a cycle. But for the average person, he's one of those guys where he's got thick joints. From the first day he touched the weight, he was already stronger than most people. He's one of those just like really gifted strength. So it's good that he went into strength sports. But for your average person, we're not going to get that strong to where this style of workout, takes that much out of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think my sheikh would be CT Fletcher, man. That guy just, the way I'll put stuff on, he'll just scream at me, and I'm like, oh, I gotta get to the gym.
CT Fletcher?
Your mother, yeah.
Isn't he like...
mother effing said.
Yeah, he's like, I command you to grow, mother effer.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, that was inspiring what he set up in LA. I mean, that is one of the cool things about weight training. It's just giving young men a direction. I mean, I love what he did. He took like gang members and just like brought him off the street and was like, get in here, lift weights.
But I think his own story is also unique, like about how him, like, breaking records and then having a congenital heart disease and then having to put a ticker put in him. And like, people think that he's just this guy that juice is not that. Like, this guy, he's just to come back like to where he is right now too, after having a heart transplant and not being able to do a push-up on the floor of his son's house to now going back to weight training again. It's just an amazing story, man. The guy is an extremely awesome guy.
Even his back, he's got all his discs are like fused.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
it's incredible.
Yeah, but I mean, the guy, I just like his motivation. I'm not saying he's like a great person to follow. So I don't know what he does. I'm not a fitness guy, but his motivation in terms of getting to the gym and putting the work in, the sweat. Because I feel like, you know what, I think
that's a big part of it, man. Like speaking to your soul. You got that's the other thing that irritates me about the evidence-based space is it's like, you know, the mechanics of it. That's one part of it, but it's got to speak to your soul. It's got to move you. You know, it's got to be integrated.
And that's what I like about it. Like, it's just like, hey, showing up is half the battle, right? Like, and if you can do that, then you're gonna eventually. If you just show up, you're gonna make progress eventually. It may not be as fast if you don't do it full time, whatever. But if you show up, you'll make progress. And I think a lot of times in the world we live today, I was talking about this the other day too, is that we live in this world and culture of instant gratification and instant results, and it doesn't happen. Like, I mean, if anything good that comes, you got to work for it.
Until my program came.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
man, I gotta pray. Can we take 2 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mort's got to bounce as well.
Yeah, I gotta actually hit my cross-training session right now anyway, so I gotta head out for that. So,
all right, brother. Nice to meet you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
All right, to all the loyal listeners, make sure you donate. Smash the like button. I'll do extra leg raisers today if you smash the like button.
We're not wrapping up the show, by the way. Just Mort's leaving.
Yeah, you can leave, Mort.
Pretty much the show's done now if I'm leaving. Just saying. No, I'm kidding. But anyways, I'll see you guys later, inshallah. So,
all right, we'll see you, man.
I love you.
Actually, I got 2 more minutes.
All right.
So I'll wait.
Oh,
I'll just dip out in the middle of the episode, though.
That sounds good.
I'm here now. If I'm gone, I'm gone.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Now
you see me, now you don't.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually really interested in this because I always I know that there's a lot of trainers back in the day that people really didn't take them seriously when they were talking about isometric training and short range training.
Yeah.
And because if you look at it, if you go to the gym and you're literally in the gym and you're holding up a curl bar or whatever, and you just go like this back and forth, no one's gonna do it. It looks ridiculous. And you're probably going to have a bunch of gym bros and people at the gym be like, hey, you're doing this completely wrong. You look like, but it's actually targeting something very, very specific, right? So I think this is actually something really interesting. I think this is a...
Sheikh, you know that problem I told you about when I'm lifting? I have, the following day, I wake up with like numb fingers. I wonder if that could alleviate that problem.
No, I have that same issue too, man. My index finger, middle finger, my thumb. I'm actually going to therapy for that. That's basically an impinged nerve.
Yeah.
Well, so I think his case though is that he's got this really wide neck, so it's already pinched.
That too. But it's most likely something in your neck, and in your traps, or something in your like. For me, it's my chest and my traps, like my through here. So I have to do a lot of the nerve flossing, and I have to do a lot of stretching and. Which is why, like, if I just go and do 20 push-ups right now, I'll wake up in the middle of the night with both my hands completely numb.
Oh, wow.
Like on fire, yeah. So I really need to start healing, and that's why the only option I have right now is just to walk and just do a little... pull-ups don't really hurt me too much. I can do pull-ups. I can do maybe a little bit of body squats, but even that kind of agitates some nerve issues that I'm having. But inshallah, within 2 or 3 months, I should be game if I stick to my...
But, coming back to this whole this awkward movement, the way I look at it is, like, if you follow people who do isometrics, like, if you notice when they do a pull-up, right, and they're going side to side like this, or they're going like this, their movement, they're focusing muscle and just that resistance of having to stop it from going forward or back is building those fibers that you want to break inside. Because the idea is when you're making muscle, you want to break those fibers as much as you can so you can fill it with muscle, with muscle tissue, right, or proteins. And so there's a guy I follow on YouTube. He's a cool guy. He's a Muslim guy. He went to jail, but his name it's called the name of the channel is called Rip Right HD. And he's a Muslim brother. Mashallah, he's on the manhaj and everything. He covers the shutter, but he's like completely like all isometrics. Like they do what they call prison workouts. So it's all on the monkey bars. There's pull-ups, parallel bars, all these things. But he's extremely ripped, and it's all isometrics. Like these guys have like solid cores for days, right? And like big muscles, big arms. I know some of it's genetics, but a lot of the exercises they do is built on breaking those small muscle fibers that you generally wouldn't impact if you're doing isolated exercises, right? Like just doing a hammer curl or something, right? Like I think these motions are complex. So not only are you also burning fat, but even like you're burning calories, your heart rate gets up because you're just doing more than one thing, right? Like when you hang up on a pull-up bar and you're moving side to side, you're engaging your core, but you're also exerting on your body, right? Completely in your biceps, your back, your shoulders, everything at one time. So it's like these complex movements. So similar, I think when you're doing this thing when you're rocking the bar with the as a bicep curl, you obviously you're not letting it fall out. You're balancing it, right? And so you're engaging your core and so many different things like that, right? But I think it's super interesting. Yeah. All right, you're back. All right.
Hey, it's awesome.
So I'm gonna see you later, inshallah. It was a pleasure talking to you. I gotta dip out of here, but inshallah, we'll catch up.
Enjoy. Get it in.
I will, man. Gotta get it in, bro.
All right.
Shalom alaikum.
We gotta give Sheikh Amir a hard time about not making dua for Morocco.
That's why they lost. Yeah, you know what?
Why didn't you make dua, Sheikh?
Why did I make dua for Morocco? I don't know if I did or I didn't. Wait, what did I tell you? I'm not going to make dua for Morocco.
I just know you didn't.
Yeah, because they didn't win.
Because they lost.
Yeah, they didn't win.
I love the S-storm that you unleashed on your Facebook page by saying that. You're like, hey, can we get some Oliyah to make dua? Like the conversation that just spun from that was wild.
It's just funny because sometimes...
I sent a post out before the match saying, hey, contact your local Oliyah to make dua for Morocco. And... underneath the comments, people just went to war on each other for like, as long as the Oliyah aren't dead, just keep on going. Oh my God, dude!
Did someone bring back the khilafah?
And then somebody was like, how can you make dua for soccer? Like, don't waste a dua. Like, it was just unbelievable.
Before I go, maybe we have to talk about it, but this is a whole interesting concept. I was talking to somebody else about this whole issue of al-wala wal-bara in sports. Like, if someone's a Muslim, do you have to support him because he's Muslim, or is it sports based?
That's important because France has so many Muslims on their team, but I can't support France because of how horrible they treat Muslims.
Colonial bastard. No,
I just can't. Yeah. No, forget about their colonial. They just right now what they're doing.
Well, not only that. I mean, look, to be honest, in 2018 World Cup, France, after they had won the World Cup, by the way, like a 85% black team, won the World Cup. Can you believe they had the nerve to write a letter that got leaked, internal memo saying there's not enough white people playing the game?
Wow.
And they just won a World Cup with them.
FIFA did?
No, not FIFA. The French national team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it came from the higher ups that, hey, why is the team all like non-white people? Like, and so imagine, like, it's just crazy. But anyways, you guys have a good time talking about that.
Wait, before you go more. I got one more.
Oh, wait, he's got one thing.
Oh, whoops, yeah.
No, on that tip, there was something, I think, right as COVID was coming down and the woke era was just really starting to annoy people. I remember that was one thing where I just had it with certain Muslims. On Sheikh Sohaib's Instagram, there was this guy saying, you have to root for Toronto over Boston because Toronto's more diverse and tolerant. And then, Sheikh Sohaib was like, yeah, but we got these two Muslims. And I was like, oh my God, it's not that deep, guys. I mean, come on, we go to sports to escape. They were just, it was obviously someone who never played sports, like trying to parse down the ethical per team to root for, according to Islamic morals,
And then you get that guy from left field who's like, brother, watching sports is haram. There's too many women uncovered. Yeah. All right, case closed.
Case closed.
All right. So, guys.
But that is the question, right? For example, when there's a team that is from Chicago, it's a no-brainer. For me, I'll root for Chicago. But when there's like two teams that you are watching and you don't know, which one to support, you're gonna choose from all these variables that align with your values and that team, and see who to cheer for. And at least I understand why people say, if there's a Muslim country, I'm gonna definitely back that, and over my home country, even if that's should at least take a higher priority. But there's a kind of arrangement or an organizing of values that happens when you're kind of cheering for your team. And it's really interesting when you think about it, at least when you see other people trying to determine what team to root for. It's not as clear always as it was with Morocco being the Cinderella story going into the tournament and winning all these games. But sometimes it's a little bit more complex. And at least I know when I was younger, it was always... I
look at sports as an escape. I feel like you should just be free to, like, if there's a certain player you like how he looks, or he gave a cool interview and you're like, oh, he's on that team, I'm voting. I don't think it should be, oh man, your aqidah in doubt because you basically, rooted for this team or that. It should just be like, I think sports are an escape. Our life is so stressful that we like to, channel and root for somebody and just kind of disconnect for a bit. That's what I see in sports. But
Yeah, I mean,
I'll probably get.
We all.
I didn't root for France, guys. Don't cancel me. But I'm just
Yeah, well, that is it's interesting just because I know we all want to say that, but it's not as clear as because guys like Khabib Nurmagomedov, he wouldn't be as popular as he is if he wasn't Muslim, right? No one's identifying with the Dagestani sports club in any other way other than that, it's a Muslim sports club, and there's a deeper sense of, an alignment.
But it's not first. It's that people love Habib just because of Muslim or not, like the guy is just as real as it gets, and you just can't help but love him. I mean, he has so much respect, and that's been a great thing. Yeah, I could see if somebody was rooting against Habib, I'd be like, well, what's going on there? So I see your point, I guess, from that perspective.
Well, even that dimension, that good guy dimension, came out later, as because the whole Dagestani players were kind of boring. They're considered like, they're brutal. They're going to destroy and beat everyone else. But when it comes to creating hype for a match or an event, they just weren't very marketable, right?
Exactly. Right. They didn't adopt the whole like marketing strategy of being a heel or being embracing the tribe. They were sportsmen, right? And I think that was one of the things that Habib really wanted to change. He's got his own league, and in
the whole Dubai thing, Qatar thing, when the countries also, many of the European countries that were supporting the, all these different leftist causes started piling on Qatar and giving it all kinds of negative publicity, at least on the Muslim social media world. Everyone kind of went to town for Qatar. They're like, hey, they went to bat for Qatar, and it was easy to kind of choose the opposite team. Anyone who was playing against England, they were cheered against. Germany, who else? I think it was Netherlands as well. There were a whole bunch of these European countries who were doing their own forms of protesting in Qatar, and at least from the Muslim sphere, it was like any team who's playing those teams, they're going to root for. So it's kind of interesting to see on that end as well.
Which team was it? Was the English that came in? There's some of their fans came in as dressed as Crusaders.
It wasn't necessarily the Crusaders. It was the what's it called? That movement was an LGBT related movement. Love, One Love. Yeah, One Love.
No, I think there were actually some that they weren't allowed. There was some.
Yeah, I think you're right about some group of fans dressed up as Crusaders, but I don't think that was as big or more representative of what the club was all about. The English team was, of course. They weren't, but there
were people that came to Qatar, because it was a Muslim country, to kind of show their past dominance in their own way, in their own political snarkiness,
Well, especially because the English team, Harry Kane was the captain of that team, and he was wearing this armband saying One Love, and he was, kind of showing his own form of protest. And then the German team took a big selfie together with their mouths covered, saying that, we can't speak about, causes that they're passionate about. So,
but in a way, that's fair game to me. That's like sport, like boxing matches historically, right? You'd see like these figures from different countries or different backgrounds, and the marketing of it was like, like say an Irish background versus maybe the ghettos of Harlem, and they're coming together, and it's like there's different culture, different background, but again, it's two warriors that you just respect, and so I think that's really one of the fun parts of sports. Obviously, it can get out of hand and get nasty, but I think it's all fair game, bringing in some of the historical context, highlighting the difference in values and the clash. It's kind of like that's what's all on the line. It's like, hey, who's going to be dominant here? And that kind of makes it fun, as long as it stays within. Obviously, sports fans can get out of hand, after events and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I just remember like sometimes Mort buys these boxing matches, and I have no idea who's fighting, and I'm like, I don't know who to root for, and I'm looking through my Rolodex of categories and things that, well, you always want to root for one person over another. And I'm like, okay, well, one guy's a black guy, one guy's a Mexican. Should we play the oppressed Olympics game and see who to root for? Okay, well, maybe I should root for the style of boxing instead. Like,
do you think that happens to everybody? Look,
I think it does. Go ahead.
I don't.
Remember when I watched football with you guys at Super Bowl? I'm not using myself as a great example, but I'm saying I think there's many people out there like me. Like, I just like to watch a good game. I don't care who wins, because I'm actually not a football fan, right?
Yeah.
But even the step before getting into being a fan of a team, like, I'll watch basketball, I'll watch the finals, I'll watch the Super Bowl, right? I don't watch football throughout the year. I'll watch some highlights once in a while. Yeah. My brother's some highlights. I just want to watch amazing capability, right? And I just want to I just want to appreciate like a nice
heart,
like a Lamar Jackson highlight. You know what I'm saying? And so I think the next step, like, we really have to ask ourselves, like, I know it's a world and it's an international thing, but as far as teams, why do people get such cult following, right? Why are there such cult followers behind a team?
That's the fun part of it.
No, that's a fun part of it. But I'm saying when individuals are boxing, and that's the next point, is like the cult part. I get the tribal, the unity, that part I get. But if there's two boxers that you don't know and you've never heard of them, I'm just wondering, what's going on in your mind as that beautiful specimen of mind you have, Sim, of why you have to give yourself an excuse to.
Oh, it's a bare bones, like a caveman mentality. I mean, look, it happens even when my wife doesn't watch any sports, but when she walks in or my son walks in, he doesn't know much about the people who are fighting. He's like, who's the bad guy? Who are we rooting for? Who's got so you just have to pick a side to root for, and I think, well, when you're watching competition, you want to cheer for someone. You don't want to cheer for both teams. That's that's lame. You have to be on.
No, so what if you just want to watch? What if you want to watch the spectacle of two gladiators going at it, just appreciating both of them?
No, I mean, you can. You're certainly within your rights to do that, but it's more enjoyable. Like, you kind of take
the UFC
satisfaction. Yeah,
the UFC figured that out, and so did boxing. But like, that's where the whole heel, like Chael Sonnen kind of mastered that, where he realized nobody wanted to be disliked. They were all trying to go in and be like the honorable martial arts guy. But the fans, like the pay-per-views, go way up because of our just instinctive, like, there's got to be a good guy and a bad guy. So Chael was like, I want to be the bad guy, And
yeah, I see that.
And his criticism of modern bad guys is they break, I think they call it the third wall. Like, so basically, like, they get rid of the shtick. Like, when it's on an interview, they'd be like, oh yeah, I was just kind of playing that up or whatever. But he was like, no, if you're a true heel, you go all the way with it. You don't let people in on the gimmick. You basically go, you take the booze, you walk out, you freaking be the bad guy. And you, like, I remember Chael, like, behind the scenes, he was getting one of the Brazilian, I think it was Vanderlei Silva, he was getting them so ticked off because, the Brazilian culture and the pride of martial arts is so strong and there's an honor to it and stuff. And Chael was just like, just getting under his skin. And then behind the scenes, Chael was like, look, you got to calm down. Like, you're the white hat in this thing, and like you're going to turn the fans, because Vanderlei was reacting so much and becoming such like a sour sport against Chael, that Chael was like, it's flipping, you're basically going to make me the white hat, and it's getting all screwed up, so that's like a funny backstory. Right, but Sim, like with you, like for me, I follow a lot of the UFC fight. I don't follow any other sports. I love their background story. It's so fascinating because they have so much on the line. A lot of times they've come from nothing. They have no health insurance. A lot of times they'll go into the ring with injuries.
Yeah.
And because they get a certain amount of coverage, like 3 months after the fight or whatever, or like anything that was caused in the fight, then they get coverage for that, right? So a lot of times UFC fighters will come into the ring hiding their injuries so that they can then, after the fight, go get those all fixed up. So I might be different than a lot of fans, but I don't like to see the punches, the gratuitous punches at the end. I want to see both fighters coming out healthy. I just want to see a great fight. Usually I'll have somebody I'm rooting for, but rarely am I like rooting for a guy to get really, really hurt, because they're, by default of being in that sport, they're usually really honorable men.
Other than Conor McGregor.
Yeah, with some exceptions, right? And Conor, the same thing. Like he understood that, and obviously he went to a point where he became really hated, but he knows how to sell tickets, and he doesn't have a boundary. He just has disgraceful ethics on that part. But yeah, man, he got people to really hate him and buy into that whole thing.
One of my cousins is a huge fight fan, and he looks at just the overall character of that person. Even if the opponent of a fighter, he's a Muslim, but if a guy like Frankie Edgar, he's humble and just fights with the heart, he will cheer for that guy over that Muslim because he loves humility in people. He loves character, and that's his favorite variable when he's choosing one fighter over another. And it's just interesting when you kind of get into the mind of people who are supporting one side.
You become fans for different things. Like Khamzat, I'm a big fan of, even though he's had some like public character, maybe questionable things, but also just the dynamic. Like sometimes when there's like a force that's just like we all want to see that crazy force, like a Tyson just coming out and just destroying everybody. So sometimes like if Khamzat goes up against somebody that I like, I'll still probably root for Khamzat. I'm just hoping that other guy doesn't get like crippled or have his career ended or anything like that. So you're right. There's a weird calculus that goes on. Yeah.
Sheikh Amr, does that answer your question?
No, yeah, it definitely answers my question. Yeah, I think, I think it answers my question.
So before the show, we were me and Yusuf were talking about our love for conspiracy theories, and an interesting tangent from what we were talking about with the World Cup and everything was the whole Grant Wall death, that many journalists in the United States were trying to cast a suspicious eye on Qatar for, they weren't saying it blatantly, but they were insinuating.
Well, his brother came out, right? His brother came out and just flat out said that Qatar killed him.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was. At least if he didn't say it blatantly, he heavily insinuated.
Suspicious.
So
right.
And because he said that, oh, you know what, he was perfectly healthy, and so apparently it was revealed that he died of a aortic valve aneurysm, if I got that right. And his wife, who's also a physician, she confirmed it, and she said, hey, Qatar didn't have.
She's not just any physician.
Yeah.
She was on the thing board, the thing we can't talk about. She's on the board on Biden's committee or whatever.
Oh, yeah. She's a big time physician, right? Yeah, you're right.
She's in the politics. She's basically deep into the politics on the advisory. As far as with, I believe it's either Biden or Fauci or one of those.
So, pardon my ignorance. Who's the guy that died? I'm sorry.
He was a journalist who initially wore that T-shirt, that it was like a LGBT rainbow type T-shirt, okay. And he wore it as a form of protest when he arrived at Qatar, and I'm trying to find a picture for you guys here. Where is it?
So he ended up dying during this whole World Cup thing.
Yeah, he wore this shirt here. Hang on. So I'm showing the viewers this shirt, and there was some controversy around him having to take.
He wasn't allowed to take it off.
Yeah, he had to wear it inside out or something like that, and yeah, here we go. So this guy, his brother is a homosexual, and he wanted to come out in support of him, and people were insinuating that after a few weeks of being at, not even a few weeks, a couple weeks of being at Qatar covering this event, he ends up passing away. He was taken to a hospital, and they thought that he had bronchitis or exhibited some symptoms of some kind of a viral or bacterial infection, and they gave him some antibiotics and sent him on his way. But turns out a few days later he ends up passing away. The Western media took his death and said, oh, there's suspicion on Qatar's end for assassinating him, but they didn't say that blatantly because they had zero evidence of that. But it made me think about how sometimes conspiracy theories can kind of, when you have a narrative, you kind of want to piece together things to make sense out of things that may have logical explanations. But there are situations when conspiracy theories are completely valid and have been proven. Yeah. And they still call them conspiracy theories, but even though it should have been like some much more apt term like conspiracy fact.
Just a conspiracy.
Or just a conspiracy.
Someone who conspired to do something.
Yeah. And we know many of those examples that are through the U.S. government. What Yusuf, what's
well, first of all,
I want to know what got you into conspiracy stuff.
What's that?
What got you into gravitating towards conspiracy stuff?
You know, I don't even know if I gravitated into it, but I think like what's interesting now is I feel like we've been psyoped. I don't know how long it's been going on. It's just something I've paid attention to lately, which is notice what gets called a conspiracy and what doesn't, right? It's not an equal opportunity term. Like, for example, the idea, the insinuation that Qatar was, that's a ridiculous theory on the face of it, because Qatar doesn't want that smoke. I mean, come on, what's in it for them? Why would they? That just makes no sense. What do they get out of that? It's a huge, why cause beef for no reason? I mean, it's enough. They took their stand. They basically said, hey, this conflicts with our values. We're not going to support we're not going to let you, kind of advertise for the LGBT in here. And they were successful in that. So they kind of got their victory. They didn't need, like, what? That's just ridiculous, right? It would just cause a lot of unnecessary harm. But that didn't, and that's something that a lot of people put out there. And the people that put that out there, they're never called conspiracy theorists, right? People might say, oh, that's a bit presumptuous, or you're kind of jumping ahead, or whatever, but they would never characterize them as a conspiracy theorist. So I think, to me, the term's been used so much that now it's to the point where it's really lost its power. And it's almost like when you hear the term being used or directed one way, you almost feel like, oh, you mean like outside basically the way the people in power, so whoever happens to be in power at that time, if that narrative or that thing that you're, curious about, right? And we could talk about, sometimes if you just ask questions, or if you poke holes in what's being put forward, like a story comes out and you're like, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. They just had eyewitness testimony on camera say XYZ, and all of a sudden we're not hearing that anymore. And like, oh, what do you think happened? And you're like, look, I don't know what happened. Like, you're a conspiracy theorist. You think that such and such. I'm like, hey, let's slow down. Don't jump to, I think I know what happened. I'm just saying I have questions, right? And I think that we're now in a situation where if you don't accept what the initial thing is, right? Like, I got questions about the DJ that just, I don't know if you guys follow pop, like celebrity news, right? But the DJ that just supposedly committed suicide. I got questions about that. They just announced it as a suicide right away, right? Did you guys know about that one, DJ Twitch?
No, I don't know much about him. I don't listen to hip hop. I'm a pretty...
No, he's not a hip hop. He was Ellen. You guys, Ellen DeGeneres, you know her?
Yeah.
You know any of the stuff surrounding her, Anne Hesh, her original girlfriend or what have you?
Not in depth, no.
Okay. So I won't. But yeah, the bottom. She's the thing is, I got to be careful. I'm not experienced on YouTube. I don't know what's allowed out there, but it's just the guy was an extremely well-adjusted man. Basically a good-looking dude, in shape, has 3 beautiful kids, beautiful wife, and also had a live stream to where he's like sharing his feelings. He's not like one of these like strong, silent types where you don't know what he's thinking. I'd still consider him a very kind of masculine man, but very like modern in a sense that he was just open on the stream, right? You could find the streams online, and he's the guy, he would just put what's on his mind, right? What's on his heart, whether it's kind of like he was into the police, the BLM thing. So he would talk about that. And he would just talk about what's on his heart, but in a way that was, pretty articulate and so forth. So all that's to say, he's a guy who like would be on Instagram and do his dancing. And so the narrative is that this guy just left his house with 3 beautiful kids, went to a hotel down the street, and then just shot himself. And it's like, they immediately called it a suicide. And I'm like, hey, maybe it was. I guess that's possible, but that's one of those ones where it's like, make it make sense to me. I want to see more footage. I want to see what possibly, was there something he was ashamed about or what have you, but given the fact
what
that
did his
he
family
is
say?
Powerful. Publicly, right? So they don't want to be labeled anything. I mean, right now they're just like, oh, we're devastated and so forth, but I'm just not satisfied with it, right? And then we get gaslighted on social media like, hey, suicide prevention awareness, reach out to somebody, check on your strong friends and all that. I'm like, oh, wait, I'm not ready to accept that just a father, that people are just checking out, right? Right now we seem like we're in a situation where people are just passing away left and right, whether it's, from heart things, kids dying in their sleep. And we're just now conditioned that death is a normal, people checking out, suicides, and we're just conditioned. That's like a normal part of society. And And I'm
what do you think? What do you think is going on with the heart thing? Like everyone's wondering. There's no scientific explanation. People have thought that it was like COVID in the beginning when for those who don't know, there's a phenomena that's happening at least in a few Western countries where people
the journalists, right? The journalists
with heart-related issues, people who are otherwise normal and they're thought to have a normal functioning or at least considered to be healthy, they're ending up passing away due to heart-related issues. Some initially thought that it was related to some previous COVID infection causing damage on their heart, and as a consequence,
Mike Leach, right? So Mike Leach, the coach of the Raiders, the Texas Tech. I don't know if you know. He was a famous Washington State coach. I don't know if you follow college football, but he was a famous football coach. 61, just died a couple days ago of heart.
Wow. Yeah, I don't watch college football, but that's insane. And I think there's incredible statistics to back up what's actually happening. And I know there was a UK study that was done that was talking about this as well, but I don't think they have enough studies from the rest of the world. They have, because those metrics aren't very well tracked in other developing countries, but in the West they do have a lot of statistics to back up this claim of heart-related issues.
Well, I would say all of us, any of us that know morticians, embalmers, make friends with those people and ask them, see what's going on, because that's the narrative that I'm seeing. And it's, there's a documentary that's out there you can find on Rumble called Died Suddenly. And again, I don't even know if you're allowed to say that, so you guys can.
No, you can say anything.
Yeah. So basically, it seems to be in those countries that have the strictest kind of preventative measures and mandates and so forth. It seems to be that those are the countries, suffering the most from it. So, people can do their own research and just, I think that's what's important. Is just having the debate open so that science truly can prevail instead of, politicizing it.
One of the ideas was that it was like the sedentary lifestyle, right? That the lockdowns caused, that people stopped becoming active, and this is kind of the reverberations or the after effects of the lockdowns, because people were locked up indoors and they didn't go out, they didn't do any physical activities. Gyms were shut down like yours were, and even if you wanted to buy exercise equipment, they were all sold out. And you can even, the most you could do is maybe have a walk around the block with people harassing you about wearing a mask while you're walking outside in the sun.
This is anecdotal, but it still comes off as odd. Have you seen the montages of athletes like on the field, just like, falling down, falling over from a heart failure? Have you seen any of those montages going around? Yeah. So, there's a guy named Stephen Kirsch out of the Silicon Valley. He was like, early on, he's a successful entrepreneur. I think he developed the optical mouse, and he's always been into philanthropy. And, he's, leans left on his politics. I don't know why that's relevant, but just to show that he's not like, he was kind of part of the system, right? So he was the first to, sign up for the vaccine. And early on, he was like, hey guys, it was clear that, if you remember early on, they were just telling us, hey, stay home unless you're really, really sick, then come to the hospital, right? But it was maddening that there was no talk of like treatments, of things that, hey, we could at least try, maybe some things that were like not 100%, but hey, try this. It's the risk-reward equation works out, right? That was frustrating to me, is there's no kind of general advice, but like, at home, here's a few things you could try. It was almost as if the fear was trying to be ramped up so that the case for emergency authorization could be made. So he was actually running his own, he helped run a trial on a drug, famotidine, I'm going to mess it up, but basically they ran some trials and they found it was actually helping as far as, death rates and so forth and recovery rates. So he funded that. And at that time he was just like, oh, cool, I found something. And he just wanted to be part of helping out. And as he ran into roadblocks and he realized, oh, wait a second, something's going on here where, things aren't what they seem like. Why are people not wanting to hear about good news. And so he's someone that people could look up. He's got a Substack. He's also on a documentary, Died Suddenly. He's discounted because he's not a scientist, but he's in touch with many scientists. He's kind of part of a team. And you don't need to be a scientist to be able to look at graphs and read data, and that's kind of what he's done. And he's just a really well-educated guy who's just done a lot of reading on the topic and networking. I think he's put people together. He talked to a team of scientists in Israel that were briefed, and they basically. So I guess Israel ran a study. It didn't get much publicity, but it was on safety data on the boosters, I think. And they had their conclusions, but that data didn't get published for some reason it didn't circulate. And so Steve Kirsch was trying to contact the CDC and say, hey, well, do you guys want to check out these results, right? And he's got videos on this. You can hear him mention himself, but I'll just briefly abridge it. So he tried to email everyone in the CDC. He even went, one of the heads of the department for the safety, vaccine safety for the COVID. She actually lived near him, so he went to her door and left a note. He was knocking. He left a note would you be interested in this data? Yes or no? I can set up a meeting for you to view the videotape session of the Israeli scientists, reporting the findings and so on and so forth. So he got turned down at every level. So he's become kind of a bit of a whistleblower, and that's someone interesting to just look into, and people can make their own mind up as to what they believe. But he's been saying that it's this new technology wasn't well tested, and we're finding in that documentary it's showing that coroners and morticians are reporting this long fibrous thing that's in the artery, and it's not consistent with the normal blockage. It's like a new thing. So basically what the theory is, it's related to the mRNA technology somehow. So I'm not making any declarations. That's kind of something that it made sense to me. But I think what he's saying is talk to, just so the information is not politicized, if you know any morticians or embalmers, talk to them and see if they're seeing something new that they've never seen before, right? Because that would say it can't be just regular heart attack. It's got to be related to something new that we introduced to the population and had everybody take.
Yeah, it's definitely worth thinking about, because most of us, at least in the West, at least, took the vaccine, and we don't know exactly what we put in our body. We did it for the greater good, despite all the warnings and but for many of us to function, some of our work required it. So even despite your better judgment, you were kind of forced to take it. You couldn't go into restaurants. You had to, in Chicago where we are, you had to carry a card to go into restaurants, and you wouldn't be let in without the vaccine card.
Yusuf, are you vaccinated?
That's my HIPAA medical rights allow me to be private on that, my brother.
No, the reason why is, bro, I actually originally, and Sim, you could be honest about this, I was very skeptical about getting vaccinated. I really didn't want to do it. And I delayed it I was the last one to get it. When did I get vaccinated? I think I got vaccinated in 2021. Because everyone was just you gotta do, oh, what the heck is wrong with you? And I'm like, dude, okay, either I'm wrong and everyone else is right, or I'm right and everyone else is wrong. And there's no way I can be right. And then everyone started making me feel guilty about it, so I just ended up getting it. But after I got it, I was like, dude, I got the vaccine in me now. Now, look, I think at heart I'm a conspiracy theorist. I just don't talk about it too much.
Right.
You start talking about all this conspiracy theory stuff, it's bringing out these emotions in me that haven't come out 20 years.
People tend to marginalize you, right? People tend to say oh, Sheikh Amr, he's one of those kooky conspiracy people.
Yeah, he's one of the kooky sheikhs. But I was very, I don't know why I was skeptical. Just everything just seemed a little off. But I think it's one of those things, man. It's we are, whether everything, let's say one day we wake up and we just find out all this was just nonsense, right? And I know a lot of physicians, I know a lot of doctors, and I know a lot of people who've been in emergency rooms, but I do want to give them respect and let them know that I'm not like just writing them off. But in a hypothetical situation, we can all wake up and be like, okay, you know what? There was something really wrong with all the vaccines and everything, and it just polluted all of us. At the end of the day, it's just one of those things. Look, and I don't mean to sound morbid and like nihilistic, but we're all gonna die, right? And I'm not saying that's an excuse to do bad things, but if you're living in a situation and you end up consuming something even though you didn't want to, and it just becomes a part of your body and a part of your life now, it's one of those things, man. And if it is fasad, if it is a part of mischievousness, Allah tells us in the Quran that, we're going to reap the benefits of our own doings, and all, mischievousness and criminal activity is apparent on land and on sea of what man's hands have committed, so that we can give them a taste of what they did, right? And a lot of these, this happened throughout history. And look, it's one of those things, like, I'm not sure that I'm as much of a hoaxer, like I believe that COVID is a hoax. Like a lot of people were telling me, a lot of my friends or some,
but it's not a hoax.
No, it's not a hoax, but the whole vaccine thing, for me, it's still kind of hard to believe, but it's one of those things, like, if I wake up one day, because I was kind of skeptical, and I find out that it was, pardon my vernacular, but like, medical vernacular, it poisoned our bodies, I don't think I'd be surprised. It's one of those things, I'm like kind of in the middle. Like, I know that there's all this stuff around it, but I think
Pfizer is the most fined, they like in the, I forgot the department, like U.S. Justice Department, whatever it's called. They've paid the most fines and been caught the most for, like, getting in trouble. So it's not like way beyond the pale. It's not a wild conspiracy theory that Pfizer would do something without like checking every box. Like, oh, there's this huge financial upside, and really all it is to me, there's a line between conspiracy theory and just incentives, like the checks and balances, just becoming a little bit corrupted, right? So the problem is when the regulator and the regulated start to get cozy, and they start to have too much of a symbiotic relationship. That's where the public, that's where the red light, the danger is, right? And so that's where I think people would have a right to just be a little bit like, hey, wait a second, are we sure all the testing was done? And I was just looking at it from a risk reward. It's like, hey, we know that from early on, the data was saying that the COVID was highly affected towards the older population. And I know that there was a big argument being like, hey, don't kill grandma, it's your responsibility. But then, it was early on, there was doctors online, even very pro-system doctors, just saying, look, you can't stop a respiratory virus from a vaccine with a vaccine. Like, you're not gonna, all you're gonna do is, hopefully protect yourself, but you can't because it replicates in the nose and the throat. So I didn't like the way they were not talking to us like adults. Like, even they talked about the mask. They said, well, the reason why we didn't say to wear masks at first is because we were worried we'd run out of masks. So that told me, like, okay, you're not talking to us like adults. You're just basically giving us messaging to make us take the action that you want us to take, but we're not getting full on, that's all I want. I would like, and I think the other thing too that was real dangerous for me was, let's say that it was 100% legit. The whole idea of forcing a population, like if you believe in the kind of a free society, what you want to do is like make that argument and really strongly encourage people and say, look, guys, here's the evidence, right? And here's why we should do it. And we're giving this campaign out and we want everyone to go do it. But the moment it turns to force, what people didn't realize is you're now giving the government a real dangerous, that's a real dangerous precedent of authority that actually could be more harmful to your health than, a short-term, the virus is real scary and so on. But once those mechanisms are in place, it's like turnkey totalitarianism, right? It's like, oh, we got it. We have this system where it's like there's a passport, there's a social credit. If you're not up to date on your shots, your ATM card only works within a certain radius of your house, or that's kind of the machinery that seemed to be coming in place. And so that really kind of was alarming to me, especially in California, and I'm sure over there in Chicago. The rhetoric was just so hardcore about like, you got to do this, or it's like, hey, that's where I kind of wanted to push back and be like, no, I'm all for making it. And there's a scientist out here, Jay Bhattacharya, he's out of Stanford. He was making that same argument. He took the vaccine. He was very pro at the time. He was recommending it. but he was saying it's bad public health policy to mandate this thing and fire people who don't get it. You're going to actually help the anti-vax movement more than anything. And he was right. He was saying that like a year and a half ago. And it turned out he's right, because from all this pushing so hard, a lot of people went back and looked at the data on some of the others and like, oh, wait a second, you guys the numbers are different. You know, it's one thing to reduce the amount of negative tests, but it's another thing to lower the death rate, right? So a lot of times lying with stats and pharmacy, you know, there's a whole field of selling drugs and how to, you know, talk about relative risk versus absolute risk and putting your best foot forward, right? You can make it sound like it's an amazing benefit, and then, you know, when somebody else breaks it down and has a better stat background, you're like, oh, okay, it's not quite how they presented it.
Do you ever want to leave California?
Yeah, my parents are here, so that's kind of why I just love the fact that my kids can be near my mom and my stepdad. So that's kind of why we're here. My daughter likes her school, so she's a junior. Yeah. But I could totally see myself leaving, you know, especially after she graduates.
It's getting very, very authoritarian over there, and many people are getting frustrated, and there's widely circulated articles about, you know, this flight that's happening out of California that many people are leaving, but it's also, California is a very hot destination as well, and I'm sure the state hasn't even felt the impact of it because there's many people always willing to buy property up over there. So,
yeah, I think that cities like San Francisco, Chicago, like they got to be wiser about how commerce and stuff is run, because, you know, things go bad quickly. There's a tipping point, right? So you see the news like Walgreens and different shops are leaving San Francisco just because you can't really do anything about the theft. People just come in and take stuff. And that can reach a tipping point real fast. So
that's wild. People who don't know what San Francisco is like, when I visited there, there's signs up everywhere saying that, hey, don't leave your belongings in your car. All kinds of break-ins happen. Yeah. People are breaking into convenience stores and just stealing. Like a mob of people will just go and steal stuff out of a Walgreens or a store similar to that, or a pharmacy, and just take what they want, and there's no one stopping them. And you
can't do anything. You literally can't stop them, or you'll get in trouble, you know. And Chicago, there's feces everywhere. There's homeless everywhere.
Chicago, I think. Sorry to cut you off, man. I think Chicago is working on that policy too, right? Any store, $900. If somebody takes $900 worth, you're not allowed to pursue them.
So what is the city reimbursing them? What's happening?
I don't know the fine details.
Yeah.
I just know the limit was $900. That's all I can remember from those few articles.
That's insane to me. So I could
it's a subtle, you know, it gives the government so much control, right? So for those that believe in central control, again, once you take small business out of it, right, you basically, all the power goes back, you know, because the small businesses don't give much tax to the government, so they don't really care about them. It's like, hey, as long as we're cozied up with the big industry, we're cozied up with Hollywood, we got media under, then it's like, boom, that's full control. People don't realize that small business is super important to just public health, freedom of thought. The healthier small business can be, the more opportunity you have. You know, people might love to work for a big corporation, but if small business is thriving, you always have a chance. Once you get stuck on a bad team or something, you could bounce, you know. And people tend to say, oh, let's regulate more and more. Let's get the billionaires, let's make sure the companies are fair to the employees. It's like, no, just allow the economy to move, have plenty of small business. And the moment you're no longer happy, you just get your uncle to get you, or your cousin, your uncle, and you guys just go open up a shop and do your own thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what else is on your radar with these conspiracies?
Conspiracy, man. Yeah. So I'd love to ask you guys first. So I got one that's going to blow your mind, and I think that you guys can push back on it once. If you see that it's actually true, it's going to be like it's going to be shocking how manipulated, like how easy it is to manipulate our viewpoint, because it's such a out of the box one that everyone's accepted. But when you actually look at the evidence firsthand, you're going to be like, how could we have missed this? And man, they really just sold this one to us, and we just moved on, right? And then so I'm gonna give that one, but I'd love to hear from each of you, like, what's one conspiracy that you're kind of like, you don't put out there when you meet people for the first few times, you know, until someone's a close friend, you would share it. Like, let's just pretend it's us. Like, what's one for you, Sam?
In regards to conspiracy theories?
Something that some people would consider a conspiracy theory, you know, that like you wouldn't just be willing to throw out there.
Well, the obvious ones are like JFK, right?
Yeah, I think even government documents would confirm there was a second shooter. So that's kind of that's hard to say conspiracy, but yeah.
But I genuinely believe there is some kind of cover up related to the sighting of UAPs, which stands for unidentified aerial phenomena. I think the government knows a lot more about these entities. I know in the Muslim sphere, I've kind of proposed the idea that these are some kind of form of jinn. There's just way too much overwhelming evidence and so much overlapping evidences that are happening from places like Skinwalker Ranch and.
I saw that. Did you see that show?
Yeah.
He got me on that. Got me on that. And my son, I told my son that Sim is all about researching Bigfoot and all that stuff. My son, he's been asking me for like a year to talk to Sim and sit down with Sim about Bigfoot because I try my best to listen to it, but I don't know enough. When my son talks to me, I was like, man, you just got to talk to Uncle Sim, bro.
Yeah.
So he's still been waiting for a year to talk to Sim. Like, he wants to sit down with him for like an hour and like ask all the questions that he has of everything he's been researching. He tells everyone in our house there's Bigfoot. We go on like road trips and he'll see some tracers. He's like, oh, what if there's Bigfoot over there?
See, that one's hard because there have been people caught scamming, right? There was a guy who basically filmed the Bigfoot, and then on his deathbed, like, it was found out that it was just a scam. And they have actually a department in, I think, Washington State that actually like tries to track Bigfoot. They have technology to like put it in the forest and everything. So that one's hard for me to grab onto.
I'm not saying there's a hairy primate. There's two theories about Bigfoot. There's one that says that there's
after this,
there's a primate. There's a after this what?
After this, Sim is going to convince you. Go ahead, Sim.
No, so there's two.
My Bigfoot Shahada is coming.
Yeah, there's two theories about Bigfoot. That one is that it is a creature that's elusive, and it's from our what the secularists or atheists call our ancestors, our primate ancestors. It's an intelligent creature, and it's able to hide its tracks and go away unnoticed. Or live unnoticed in the forests of the world and the uninhabited areas of the world. The second theory is that it's paranormal, and that it's something that they can't put a picture on. It's elusive. It knows that people are searching for it when you are looking for it, and when it wants to reveal itself, it will. But quickly disappear. And there's just a whole lot of evidence behind the reason why I subscribe to that latter theory. Primarily because there's so many eyewitness accounts.
Oh, really? There's a lot of eyewitness accounts.
Sorry, chaos.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. Like, I didn't know that. I didn't know. So there's a lot of people that have seen it. I mean, I just thought it's like a few.
No. There's tens of thousands of eyewitness accounts all over the world. It's not just like an American thing. Bigfoot is something that we kind of use in America, but it's talked about all over the world in many different languages. And
interesting.
And it's always in these uninhabited areas where people can't describe it. Like, they don't know how to put a word to it, but there's many cultures, tribes, people who live in those areas. They offer sacrifices or offerings to the forest or the mountain whenever they go on it, and they seek its permission before going on there because of so many unexplained deaths.
And the tree that disappeared, Sim, they went camping. We were watching that.
Yeah, actually, it's from your area, the Yuba City 5. Yusuf, I don't know if you ever heard of that mystery, but it's basically a bunch of campers. The kids were going. By the way, they were suffering from Down syndrome, but it doesn't really make a difference because they were functioning people. They knew how to drive cars, and they were going to a basketball game. And they told their parents they'd be back by 9 p.m. or something. And they had, on their way back from the game, they had stopped at a gas station, and they ended up going completely the opposite direction, and their bodies were found months later. Their car was still filled with gas. There were some of them were trapped in another vehicle or some kind of abandoned army vehicle that had rations and stuff. They had plenty of food. They weren't that far away from the interstate where they could have flagged someone down for help. It's just an incredible mystery. If you look up the Yuba City 5 on YouTube.
Are you thinking it's a jinn?
I definitely think it's something, some form of jinn. It's not, by the way, the jinn are like not one type. There's several different types that are prevalent, and it's not necessarily mentioned in Islamic tradition, but it's in like Arab tradition. The jinn have obviously been existent before Islam as well, so there's a lot of documentation and lore around that mystery. So people have compiled a lot of different classifications of their existence and the forms that they take and the abilities that they have. I know in the Quran it talks about the ifrit, which are the flying form of jinn, and there's many of these. I don't know if you've heard of another Californian who did a lot of research on the missing people in forest preserves. His name is David Politis. He wrote these books called Missing 411, and he's done so much research. He was a former police officer who ended up becoming an investigator for some of these mysterious disappearances from national forests, where people were disappearing within like seconds. And these aren't like happening like at an alarming rate.
That's what I'm talking about.
They're anomalous. They're just happening maybe once or twice a year or something like that. So he's compiled. That's
what I'm talking about. Remember when we were watching that documentary? I think it was the same documentary about the guy you just mentioned, the police officer, former police officer.
Yeah.
There was a family, I think, of four, a mother, father, and two kids, or maybe 3 kids. One of the kids just went behind a tree to pee.
Yeah.
And then he literally, the parents are right there, but he goes behind this big tree to pee, and then he just disappears, and they never found him after that.
Yeah. And they
looked all around, couldn't have gone far, and the parents were like right there. He literally goes behind this tree, and how long does it take to pee? 20 to 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Right? And the parents are like, wait, why is he, whatever, the father or someone goes back there, he's gone. He's like, there's nowhere to run. They could see the whole vicinity wherever he could have gone, right? So, that kind of stuff, that's understandable.
Well, yeah, and people who listen to this, they're like, oh, well, there's logical explanations, right? There's, and they try to, and that went through my head too. Like, well, there could be logical explanations of a child disappearing within moments. But when you have so many specific circumstances that are all like collaborative, they're all like corroborating each other. Sorry, they're saying that some of the children who have been found, who were disappeared, heard they heard a grandmother who had actually passed away. They heard her voice calling them, and they went away. And after a whole night of searching with search and rescue parties, they found the child in the middle of a marsh, just without any clothes and just sitting there,
Well, and the reason why I don't find that far-fetched.
Yeah.
Even in the desert, look, the desert, this is known very, very well. If you go to any desert and you ask people, one of the main reasons why someone new to the desert or young kids don't travel away from their village is because everything looks the same and the desert will swallow you. The second is that the shayateen, with their voices, will distract you until you get completely lost. That actually happened to one of my really, really close friends. He was with me in Mauritania. He wanted to travel to the main road. So there was 40 kilometers into the desert. There's this village. Along it, there's very tiny, small villages or little camps here and there. But there's a huge village, right? Of maybe like 5 to 10,000 people of population, right? Anywhere between those, So he was in a hurry to get back. He was Algerian. He had to call his family. So he didn't want to wait 2 or 3 days or whatever for the car to come and pick him up. So he wanted to walk the 40 kilometers, get onto the main road, and hitchhike. Everyone in Mauritania, at least when I was there, they used to hitchhike. Totally safe. It's totally fine. It's totally understandable, right? It's part of the culture. You'll see that in Saudi too. When you're going for Umrah and you're walking, someone will pick you up and take you to the Haram, right? That same culture. Bedouins have the same culture. So he's traveling, and he was traveling by looking at the stars, but then it ended up being cloudy night. But he still tried to walk. And when he thought he was heading in the right direction, he would hear voices of people. So like, oh, cool, I could just go and ask them, but they can't be too far away. They're probably just camping out here somewhere. They probably live around here. And he would see a little bit of like flashlights. Everyone in Mauritania carries flashlights at night so they know where they're going. It's a thing. When you go out at night, make sure you take a flashlight with you. Scorpions, snakes, all that kind of stuff. And said I would see flashlights and I'd run towards them and there'd be nothing there. And then I would hear a mother calling her son, and I'd go and run towards that and it wouldn't be there. And next thing I find myself I have no idea where I am anymore. Right? He ended up having a really difficult situation where his legs went numb, and finally somebody saw him when he got close to the road, and he actually ended up going to the hospital after that just to get himself checked out, and was kind of delirious and because of lack of water and all that kind of stuff. But that kind of stuff happens all the time in the desert. Yeah. And it's understood that it's jinns and the shayateen that are distracting people.
One of our listeners wants to chime in real quick. Brother Abdul Muhaymin. Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Abdul?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
What's up, guys? How's everything?
Chilling, bro.
Alhamdulillah.
Sorry, I'm driving. I would put on the video, but I'm just heading home. I was listening to your Bigfoot talk, and I just realized it's in the hadith, bro.
Which one? What hadith?
When I think it's mutawatir, but Sheikh can clarify. But isn't there there's a hadith about whenever I forget which Sahaba, but they went and they landed on the island, and then there was Dajjal on the island. Whenever there was a hairy creature that came and talked to them, isn't that like an exact description of a Bigfoot?
Well, when you said the hadith, then when you talk about the island, I knew what you're referring to.
The Jassasa.
Yeah, exactly. It can be a description, but Wallahu alam. I honestly, I think that thought crossed my mind a few times, but it can be. But the thing is that it's understood that I think that he's going to be locked up until the end of time, right? Wallahu alam.
Well, Jassasa is a unique character as well. I don't know if because the appearances of this hairy creature is apparently so widespread that I don't know if that specific creature, maybe it's part of that same species or subgroup or related to it somehow, But it's an interesting thought, Brother Abdul Muhaymin. The thought crossed my mind a while back, but I didn't know what to make of that creature, Jassasa. By the way, for those who don't know what this hadith is about, just Google it, because I don't want to mess it up. But it was about a group of Sahaba who went to an island and encountered, went to an island and met the Dajjal, and he was in chains. And then they came back and narrated the story to the Prophet, and it's classified as a Sahih hadith. I'm pretty sure, but I don't. I don't think it's mutawatir though. But Sheikh, are you there? Sheikh, are you gone?
Me?
No, Amir.
Oh,
okay.
I was gonna add.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the Dajjal is the one who's tied up, but the agents of the Dajjal in the hadith, he's literally an agent of the Dajjal, and he's working on the Dajjal's behalf, and he's out and about. So we have a concept there that there are agents of the Dajjal, and you can interact with them, and they're working for him until he's released. Whether he's released now or not, or whatever the case is, they have agents of the Dajjal, and then there's reports of these hairy creatures, and it's it's mind blowing because it's wait, these two things connect.
Yeah,
so
it's whoa. Yeah, it's absolutely, and it's a possibility. I don't know if Sheikh Amir has any thoughts further about it, but
no, I honestly have no thoughts. I didn't even know that. That was supposed to be some other subspecies of them. So Allah, I have no idea. But I really have to apologize, guys. I have a meeting in 2 minutes.
Yeah, we'll wrap this thing up.
Well, you guys keep on going. I'm gonna jump off. I don't want Brother Yusuf to be disheartened, So
I'll run through my conspiracy theory real quick, so you can check it out later.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about yours.
Okay. Sheikh, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, brother.
Okay, take care.
Sheikh. So, what have you guys looked into the Vegas shooting at all? October 1st, 2017.
With wasn't it like a
Paddock, Stephen Paddock, 60 people killed, the concert. Right. Did you ever look into it beyond what the narrative was, or just kind of like, just kind of went on with your life?
Yeah, I just kind of went on with my life. Didn't think much
so
more
that
about
one,
it.
That was one that kind of bothered people because it's like, even if somebody's crazy or depressed or psycho, there's always still a logic to it. You know what I mean? Like, for example, the Unabomber has his manifesto, and he basically was sending bombs to people that he felt were part of the technocratic security state or whatever his thing was, right? Or the Columbine shooting, they went, it's kind of like the Joker thing where they went after the people that they felt they wanted to get revenge on, or acts of violence, even if they're senseless, they still have usually a logic to it, right? And that was really weird. Like Stephen Paddock, he had the motive just never added up. And I'll get to some more hard facts, but that's just to set the context, which is like, I think even his he owned property, and his tenants always said he was like a good landlord, which that's pretty cool. Like a lot of people have a landlord they're not so happy with, and I think he did gamble, right? He had some gambling issues and things like that. But just the whole idea of raining down bullets on a country concert and just shooting kids and adults and everybody just randomly spread, like that's your grand finale, like no statement, no note, like there's no logic to it, right? And that sounds weird to say because, horrible thing, everybody that happened. And so I hope I'm not misunderstood when I say logic. Of course there's no logic to just some terrible tragedy, and my heart goes out to everybody affected by it. And that's kind of why I think it's important to not just accept, put a little bow tie on it and just accept things that don't add up and make sense. It's like we need to know what happened there, or at least know that there was a good effort investigation. So the problem with the Vegas shooting, there's many, many, many problems, but I'll probably just stick with the hardest evidence, and then people can go and go on their own journey with it. But if you pull up Sim, are you able to pull up an image?
Yeah.
All right, so let me see. Let's see what comes up on Google Images when we go Vegas shooting. And then Google Images. Let me see what comes up on my end. Okay, I'm going to put Vegas. Oh, here it is. So there's USA Today. Let me put USA Today. Vegas shooting, USA Today in Google Images. So yeah, put that up in Google Images. Vegas shooting, USA Today.
Got it.
Do you see the one with the windows broken out?
Yeah.
It's like a gold building.
Yeah. I'm showing it.
So that's Mandalay. That's Mandalay Bay, right?
Yeah.
And the official story is the one to the right, our right, the one that's on like the corner.
Oh, sorry.
So there's two windows, right? There's one on the right and one on the left.
Yeah.
Let me see. I don't think your image is your image showing two?
Yeah,
I can't tell from my
two broken windows.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So the one on the right, that's floor 32, suite 135, and that's a suite. That's a corner suite. And then the other one is floor 32, 134. Right?
Mm-hmm.
With me so far? Okay. So the narrative is that he had both rooms. There was supposedly 3 other girls with him, I think even on the list, but that's not talked about. That's just kind of another miscellaneous, like, well, that's weird. Why did he have all these girls with him? But so he had 2 rooms, and the Las Vegas Metro footage of when they entered the actual when they breached his room. So the shooting officially started at 10:05, and I think the last volley was around 10:13 or something like that. It doesn't matter too much for this particular aspect of it, but basically, when they breached his room, they went into floor 32, 135, the corner suite. And that footage is interesting. You want to go back and find the original full footage, not the New York Times edited one, because they took out some key parts that would raise questions if people heard the full video. But one of them was like, got him. Like there's a gunshot and then got him. So we don't know what that's all about. It kind of would seem like the police actually shot Paddock, but that's not really important to disprove the conspiracy theory. That's just another one, or to disprove the regular narrative. That's just one of those kind of weird things. Like you can clearly hear it when you watch the footage. You're like, what do they mean got him? Like got him, and after you hear the gunshot. But just setting that aside, the main thing is that the room that they are entering, they breached, that they blew up into and kind of rushed, was 135. And that's the room with all the guns. There were a couple guns. There's a report done. I think it was 3, no more than 8. But yeah, just a few guns spread out in 134, maybe a couple bullets here or there. But there's a whole arsenal of guns found in suite 135. And that's where Stephen Paddock's body was. You can see a picture of Stephen Paddock shot. Let me see if that's online. Stephen Paddock dead. Let's see if they've got that in Google Images.
So wait, what's at the heart of this conspiracy? What's the theme, that he wasn't alone, or that there are 2 people, or that?
Okay, yeah, I know that's the kind of the heart. So basically, I have to kind of make the case. I'll try to make it faster, because otherwise, if I just say what actually might have happened, it's just going to sound nuts. But you have to, for a fact, a person has to realize that the good thing about this one is that there's tons of cell phone footage. There's a character named Dan Blazarian that was actually at the concert, and he's a famous YouTuber guy, some kind of
Instagrammer,
right? Some kind of figure. So his actual footage is online, so you can put Dan Blazarian YouTube footage, and people can watch that, and you can see you can actually see helicopters there. But again, I don't want to get to the helicopters yet. Let's look at you could find footage during the shooting, and you can use just basic technology to do a negative filter, which will allow you to see that there's no window. And on floor 32, 135 is not shot out. 134 is. So when the shooting is happening, there's only one broken window. And again, that's just kind of, through different angles. There's videos, links that I could send people that are interested, where it just goes close up and you can kind of very clearly see. But that's at the heart of this, right? So if you can find footage where you're like, oh, they're both broken, then hey, you could kind of disregard what I'm saying. But that's at the heart of realizing something's really awry, when you realize they broke that window after the fact. Oh, and on top of that, in the Las Vegas body cam footage, you can hear the officers talking. And when they walk in, they're like, we don't have a broken window, right? So they're exploring the room, and they're like, you hear them, they're like, we're on the north side. They're like, is there a broken window? And there's a little bit of confusion, because on the ground, they're like, we see a broken window, because it turns out there was a broken window a few floors up. And that's kind of a whole other part of the theory. But at the top of Mandalay Bay is Four Seasons, which is owned by Bill Gates and Prince Waleed, who you don't hear from anymore after all this. But basically, so if you see that this guy Paddock is dead, and a coroner report says he was shot through the roof of his mouth via suicide, but yet the photos, and it looks like they're scrubbed from the internet, but you can still find them. You can find photos of Stephen Paddock lying on the ground dead, and his chest has blood on it, right? And you can even see police footage talking about how that's what they saw, a chest shot. But basically, my computer just went out. But yeah, so like the coroner report, that's weird. The autopsy doesn't match what just regular photographic evidence that we have available to the public, right? The photos that leaked out, those don't match. The weapons and stuff are in the wrong room, and they ended up having to break the window after the fact. So if the window's not broken during the shooting, it's broken after the fact. You have to look at, where did these bullets come from? Other evidence is the sound. People that know guns, they'll say this was a belt-fed weapon. right? And that would be consistent with the type of weapons that are installed on helicopters. And you can hear the audio, like if you go around and you take different YouTube clips, you can hear the gunfire. If you keep your mind open and you hear the fire, it doesn't all come from one place. So, I mean, people could dismiss that as some sort of issue with the audio, but you can see it from multiple cameras. You can hear gunfire like sounding closer and then sounding further away. Like there's some famous footage from some room in a hotel. I think that some people from Shark Tank were there. And so there's all this footage online that people have compiled and then, put the videos together. But you can clearly hear that the gunfire is sounding further away and closer, right? And then the helicopters, they're hard to see, but footage slows it down. You can see at certain points lights flashing out of the sky, gunfire volleys coming from the sky. And those helicopters are not on the flight radar, right? So that's something that, people, if they were wondering, are they the tour helicopters or what have you? But according to the flight radar, the tour helicopters have to have their transponders on. So there was no corresponding data in the flight radar. So that means these are helicopters that were basically flying dark. They'd had their transponders turned off. And then that just matches eyewitness. People at the concert, some of them even said, man, I would have thought that was coming from above me. They didn't do forensics matches on bullets. Like you don't have any forensics reports of like people that were shot and they took that bullet and said, oh yeah, it was fired from this gun in the room. So on and so forth. So at the end of the day, if the windows alone and the guns and everything, and then the fact that the police officers came in and there wasn't a window, that shows you something real shady is afoot. That kind of blows open the whole narrative. It shows that the sheriff was not being transparent when he did his media briefing. Even he got questioned by Laura Loomer, kind of aggressively, and he couldn't really have any answers for her because she was asking him why you didn't mention certain things, or you said this incorrectly, and I don't remember the exact details, but so basically, if this was helicopters, and you have eyewitnesses actually too that saw the helicopters, those are real interesting. You can see those accounts online. And if this was done by helicopters, then now the theory comes where now it's more speculation, right? So, but the conspiracy part that I'm real comfortable with people looking at, and it'll blow your mind once you see that this was pulled off and we were just gaslighted. You'll be like, whoa, if it's that easy, right, to gauge public opinion, especially with so much cell phone footage and body cam footage available, if it's that possible to shut down public opinion and just really put a lid on this and have people not ask questions, because you're always afraid to ask questions because you don't want to be disrespectful to the people that lost their life, and you don't want to be like you don't want to cause unnecessary pain, and that's kind of how they frame it, like, oh, by asking questions or questioning the narrative. But I look at it the opposite. It's like, this is like out of honor for them. It's a loss of life and something terrible happened. So if there's something going on or there's some cover up, let's push that. So now when you get onto the theory, that part gets super interesting. You look at who owned, Top of Mandalay Bay. You look at how the politics of the world changed. You look at Khashoggi got executed 1 year from, on the 1 year anniversary of the Vegas shooting. You look at what is it, the night of long swords or whatever in Saudi Arabia, where MBS had like that dinner and like basically a bunch of people got arrested, and you have a lot of stuff that's now more on the conspiracy side that's really more speculative, but it's like if you're going to accept that it's helicopters, you have to start wondering, okay, who has the resources to do that? And people that are experts in helicopters will say, well, there's only so many countries that sell that technology, and it just so happens we sell that technology to the Saudis, and we train their National Guard. So the maneuvers that they did and everything, the weapons that they were using would be consistent with what we trained them on and sold to them. So,
but what doesn't make sense to me is that what's the objective of killing all these people then?
So again, I want to make it clear that the thing that I'm willing to like tie my basically to hang my hat on is the fact that the original narrative is just totally bogus. So people can do their own research on that. The other thing is like, okay, now we speculate what happened. This is the part where I would just be like, hey, if people take it, great. If they don't, it's more of like, we need more investigation done, and who knows what really happened. But the theory would go like this, that kind of makes sense is the Saudi, they intentionally have disparate forces that are not united, right? Just in case like there's some sort of coup. That way the king always has like his national guard that's kind of like loyal to him, and they're not necessarily like in bed, you know, they're not like full on like tied to the other forces. So I don't know if you knew that. That was something interesting I learned somewhat recently.
Yeah.
So the Saudi National Guard is its own force, right? And so the idea is like, we know there's another faction inside Saudi, and they wanted an attempt on MBS, right? And so that's the idea, that he was there in the hotel, and that this was an attempt on his life, and that basically.
But wait, why would 69 people be killed because of them wanting to take out MBS?
Yeah, so that's where it's like, man,
because in order the reason why I'm asking is that you have to build, you have to have a motive, right? In any kind of investigation involving a crime or whatever, there's a motive and a strong motive behind the clues around this.
Absolutely.
Great. So we have to establish that, like.
Well, we don't have to, right? So I just want to be clear that I'm basically just saying that the original theory that they put out there, the Paddock and all that, that's bogus. Now it gets into who actually did this. You know, people would have to, with professional resources, would have to go ahead and investigate that. But the Saudi one would be, it's a dark theory, but it would be that the people, because we all know throughout history, there have been rationalizations for the greater good, right? Some innocent people have to die. So the idea would be create a distraction so we could extract MBS from the upper thing. And there was a window that was broken. You could find that online. That's up out of the Four Seasons. So the idea was use those helicopters, have somebody go down on the roof, use like, some 007 type, Mission Impossible type thing, get them, extract them, get them out of there, or just assassinate them and
wait,
and move on.
Was MBS confirmed to be in that hotel?
He's not confirmed anywhere else. There's rumors of it, but it was one of those secret things. So they don't. You can't find a clear alibi that he was somewhere else. There are people that like insiders that they go off the record. You'll hear rumors that hotel employees and stuff will say that he was, or that there was like a weird contingent of Saudis that weekend and stuff like that. So there's some smoke, but we don't have like a clear record we could find like on New York Times or something that says, oh, MBS was here this weekend. We have nothing like that.
Yeah,
but we don't have him somewhere else.
Sounds like, I mean, I'm not discrediting. I think there's still a lot of research that still needs to be done around this theory. I don't, because there's a lot of things to kind of consider when you're formulating an issue like this, because it can be dicey too, because you could, insult, like the whole Sandy Hook thing with the, Alex Jones. You could end up insulting the victims of the tragedy, and they may take offense to you insinuating or making some kind of grand characterization of their deaths when it was, maybe in their mind they have found some kind of they've come to terms.
Well, absolutely. I'm on the victim side. I mean, the thing is like a lot of victims want to know what happened. Just like with 9/11, you had a lot of victims' families who are like, hey, we feel like we're not being told the whole truth here. We don't think that the commission was really run in a full, thorough way. But when it comes to this, obviously when you break apart the narrative, the next thing is, well, what actually happened? And I just feel like it's kind of an unfair, like, and then basically the whole thing is discredited when the person can't put together the narrative, right? And that's where I don't have the ability to basically say rock solid, like, hey, this is what happened. I can show you the helicopters. I can show you certain things that happened. Now, as far as which government did it, it's more of just like kind of process of elimination. Like was it cartel? Like, I don't know. They're rich, but I don't know if they have the military training to do it. Was it, you go around the world and there's just a handful of countries that would have the technology and the skill to do that. So Saudis probably aren't the only one, but it just kind of like their familiarity with our country as far as like their training over here and their ability to like slide in and have buddies, because they would have had to land the helicopters probably like in Arizona, they would have had to. So the logistics of it makes sense. That's not to say they did it, but it's like, if we blow apart the theory that, once people see the evidence, I think they'll feel comfortable that for sure Stephen Paddock didn't do this. He was somehow set up, some sort of patsy, and some sort of cover up took place. So then that opens up a whole new thing. Like, well, what on earth happened? And so that theory made sense to me, but I have no idea what actually happened. I just want to be clear. But that Saudi one's interesting because Khashoggi did get killed in exactly a year. So it's almost like it could have been a symbolic retribution, of basically, because if he was on the team that wanted to overthrow MBS, it was basically like a strong statement of like, look, there's no, don't even try to pull that. We will come back hard.
Awesome. Well, Yusuf, we're out of time. We're entering into Joe Rogan territory with almost coming up on 3 hours, but it's been a pleasure. Let's keep in touch. This platform is yours, and hopefully we keep in touch and you come on again in the future.
Sounds good, Sam. Thanks so much for having me, and yeah, man, we'll talk to you soon.
Sorry to anyone in the chat or in the waiting room that we couldn't get to, but hopefully maybe next week we can get you in. Thank you for everyone. We'll see you all next time. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, salam.